Chapter 77 Plot. Zhua Mo stared dazedly at the patches of signs in the free market. Pu Yao's countenance was extremely smug and arrogant. The depression over the recent failure sweeping away as he said, "See, I said so. Yin beads are very valuable." Zhua Mo gradually regained his focus. As he swept his gaze across the market, he saw the little girl that had brought yin beads from him the previously. The little girl seemed quite panicked. Did she need the yin beads desperately? Zhua Mo couldn't help but speculate inside. The little girl had been very kind, so Zhua Mo had a good impression of her. It appeared that the yin beads were useful. Last time, when the little girl had come, she had only brought one out of kindness. At that time, she probably didn't recognize yin beads. Zhua Mo ruminated about selling them. Zhua Mo didn't pay attention to Pu Yao. Walking in front of the little girl, he said, "You're buying yin beads. How many?" Just at this time, Pu Yao suddenly said in a grave tone, "Run." Zhua Mo paused. Who would have thought that this little town of Dongfu was concealing so much? Even something that has been lost for so long, like yin beads, also appeared, a slightly piercing voice said reflectively. The person who spoke was the yellow-robed Taoist. "Yes. I was also very surprised when I learned about it," the silver-clad man said, a flash of puzzlement running through his eyes. "The Deviling's sect has been dead for so many years, how can a successor have appeared?" "It's not easy guessing about a sect's succession." The yellow-robed Taoist's eyes followed the silver-clad male closely. "Why do you not find someone else?" The silver-clad male's expression was normal. "The others? They can't do it." The yellow-robed Taoist smiled smugly. "Exactly. Except for you and I, the others are only average. They cannot do anything and will ruin things. Are you sure that the person who is selling the yin beads will definitely appear?" "I am not sure." The silver-clad male shook his head. The yellow-robed Taoist's expression changed, his pupils suddenly shrank. "You are making fun of me?" The silver-clad male was not affected. "I've shared the information with you. If you do not find it useful, you can leave. The method of making the yin beads, it is worthy of you waiting a while." The yellow-robed Taoist stared at the silver-clad male for a long while before suddenly laughing. "You're right. The Deviling sect was so famous in the past, what they relied on wasn't just the way to make yin beads. Haha, if I can find this person, all of the techniques of the Deviling sect would land in our hands. Don't be happy this early," the silver-clad male said. "There are probably many that have the same idea as us." "Humph. They dare to steal from me, they are courting death." The yellow-robed Taoist icily said. "It's best to be careful. Even those people from Bright Wave Jia were ambushed and one was killed." The brow of the silver-clad male furrowed. He felt extremely puzzled by that incident. Even though he had said clever words, but he was still extremely wary of the group from Bright Wave Jia. Additionally, he had needed Yuan Li to find the Yama. He was very clear about Yuan Li's abilities, but no one could have thought that Yuan Li would die in an ambush. That had ruined his arrangements. Who was it that had killed Yuan Li? This ambush, which had a clearly targeted Yuan Li, had instantly turned everything into a mess. Now that Yuan Li had been killed, his sect definitely would be angry. The branch of the Master of Bright Wave Jia would not tolerate this kind of action. If this situation dragged on, there would definitely be large numbers of high-level Xiuzha that would arrive and complicate the situation. If that happened, then he would lose the chance to benefit from this incident. He had reacted extremely quickly and changed direction when he had seen a shift. The news that Yunxia Xianzi had relied on a yin thunder bead to escape the ambush had spread through Dongfu. The attentions of many people had been aroused, including himself. Just at this time, he made a sound, and his eyes were looking at a male standing in front of a stall. "What?" The yellow-robed Taoist became alert. "Did you find something?" "He seems to have arrived." The silver-clad male stared at the average-looking man. "Him." Following the eyes of the silver-clad male, the yellow-robed Taoist also looked at Zhua Mo that was in front of Xiao Huan's stall. "A little guy with a cultivation of zhuji, that's not likely." the gaze of the silver-clad male didn't move, as he informed, that little girl is the maid of Yunxia Xianzi. Last time, it was her that bought the yin beads. There are so many stalls in the market, but that person didn't go to anyone else but straight to hers. It's suspicious, it really is suspicious. By this time, the yellow-robed Taoist also understood, and the glimmer of greed flashed in his eyes. It wasn't just the two of them that had noticed this. Just as Zhuo Mo went to leave, a young person appeared behind him. Do you want to sell yin beads? Why don't you sell to me and we can negotiate the price? Zhuo Mo, who had received Pu Yao's warning, instantly noticed the many gazes that had gathered on his person. He became alarmed and knew that the situation was dangerous. It was a good thing that the yin beads could be sold for a good price, but if he had to pay with his life in the process, then he wasn't willing. I don't have yin beads. Seeing the situation, Zhuo Mo quickly pretended to be ignorant. I just noticed that you guys have been putting up stalls here for many days and was curious. What sort of treasure is this yin bead? How much is it worth? Do you have an example? Can you let me take a look? If I encounter it, I wouldn't pass on a chance to get rich, really. The young person smiled coldly. Then why didn't you come ask me, but went straight to her? Xiao Huan couldn't resist anymore. Her brows raising, she said angrily, the one named Shui, what do you mean? Why can't he come to this lady's stall? This youth was Wentai Sanren's disciple. He was called Shui Yun. Xiao Huan always found him to be an eyesore. This one doesn't mean to suggest anything, Shui Yun smirked icily. This one is only working on behalf of my master. Something as good as yin beads, they can't all go to one person. Zhuo Mo gave a smile. You must have misunderstood. I don't have yin beads. The young man had a cultivation of Ningmai and wasn't someone that a little Zhuji cultivator could battle against. Zhuo Mo wasn't dumb. He understood that, if he really took out the yin beads right now, then he really would die. He definitely wouldn't get yin beads, and the others certainly would try to force out the spell to form yin beads. Otherwise, he wouldn't be let go. Don't have yin beads. Shui Yun snorted, that will have to be determined after I search you. Xiao Huan stood resolutely in front of Zhuo Mo and said angrily, you dare. She wasn't stupid. If Shui Yun hadn't come, she might not have recognized Zhuo Mo, but Shui Yun's behavior made her look closely. She found that, while this person's appearance was different, but his figure was similar to the person from last time. Shui Yun looked disdainfully at Xiao Huan, you're just a maid. Do you think you're self-important? Finishing, he didn't look at Xiao Huan and strode towards Zhuo Mo. Zhuo Mo saw that the situation could not be resolved, and thought that with his pitiful and weak speed even if he were to run he would most likely be unsuccessful. He really had bad luck today. Zhuo Mo grimaced inside. As expected, it was risky trying to make Jingshi like this and he needed to be cautious. Looking at Shui Yun who seemed extremely certain, Zhuo Mo's eyes darkened, murderous intent was rising inside. The other's cultivation far surpassed his and he didn't think he could win even with trickery. Noticing the confidence on the young man's face, he decided to give the other a little surprise. His eyes staring fixedly at Shui Yun, the Ling energy in his body moved furiously. He was waiting for Shui Yun to come near and what would welcome Suyu would be Zhuo Mo's strongest sword attack, Li Water Burning Heavens. Just at this time, suddenly someone interrupted, haha, no wonder Wentai Sanren isn't respected. It can be understood from seeing his disciple. Shui Yun's expression instantly changed. His eyes darkened, he stopped in his steps and shouted loudly, who is this? Your words are really frightening. Why do you hide? Do you not dare to come out? Just someone like you, are you enough for you to come out? The voice was faint and one could not locate the source. Shui Yun's expression finally changed, and there was shock in his eyes. He had focused on listening just now but still couldn't find where the voice came from. This meant that the other's cultivation was much higher than his. While Shui Yun was in shock, a figure suddenly leapt at Zhuo Mo, you dare. Several shouts sounded out simultaneously. Swords flashed and several bright lights could be seen as flying swords flew at the figure. All of these people were all highly skilled. Although their target wasn't him, the sharp sword essence inside the sword energy was enough to make Zhuo Mo's skin hurt. He was extremely shocked inside. Only now did he realize that the nondescript Yin bead had such a shockingly high value. Pu Yao did have something valuable in his possession. At such a dangerous time, such a nonsensical thought had floated through Zhuo Mo's mind. There were thousands of sword energies that formed a net, but they didn't harm Zhuo Mo one bit. The cultivation of the figure wasn't normal either. A faint green flying sword flashed and formed a net of light in front of him, barely stopping the other flying swords. The figure suddenly disappeared from his spot. Being alone, he naturally wasn't a match for the group. Just as everyone was attacking this person, a dark red rope was silently nearing Zhuo Mo. The silver-clad male was the first to find it. He snorted icily, wanting to take advantage of the fight. It won't be that easy. He pointed with a hand and a silver light struck the dark red rope. The dark red rope wasn't an average grade talisman. Like a wave, the dark red rope fluttered and then dissipated the silver light. The silver-clad male didn't waste words. His silver-hooked sword turned into an extremely thin silver light, and like a snake climbing a tree, circled and constricted around the dark red rope. The yellow-robed Taoist and the figure who had leapt at Zhuo Mo were engaged in battle with each other. The figure seemed to be shrouded in a ball of smoke. No one could clearly see his appearance. The shape of his body changed rapidly. The yellow-robed Taoist evidently was taking the fight seriously. The yellow-gold flying sword was like a sun streaking in the sky, the light radiating from it was blinding. Each move was large and vast, extremely powerful. No one was able to approach near Zhuo Mo and Xiao Huan. The pitiful Shui Yun had, instantly been sliced by these swords into minced meat. Xiao Huan's face was pale and she was dazed as she looked at the sky. Those sword energies and talismans, she almost couldn't stand under their presence. At this time, she suddenly thought that the person who was standing beside her had a lower cultivation than her. Even she was having a hard time, would he be able to bear it? Xiao Huan was certain that this was the person who had sold her the Yin beads the last time. Thinking that she had pulled someone else into this terrible situation, she couldn't help but feel guilty. As her pale face turned back, she saw the person behind her standing with a bowed head with his hands covered by his sleeves. Seemingly having noticed her gaze, the other suddenly raised his head and smiled at her. A smile that was as cold as the edge of a blade appeared strangely. Xiao Huan felt a gust of cold air suddenly rise from the bottom of her feet. Just at this time, a hand appeared without warning on Zhuo Mo's shoulder. Chapter 78, Making a move. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. When Tai Sanren had his disciple in the light purchasing the Yin beads, while he himself was concealed in the darkness. When he saw that Yun Xia Xianzi had Yin thunder beads, it was like he was struck by lightning. The many uses of Yin beads were known to all the sections. Many people know, but there were not many people that would know more than Wen Tai Sanren. In the eyes of the world, Wen Tai Sanren's origins were very mysterious. Everyone knew that he came from a small sect called Sky Fiend Sect, but it was not known that the little minor sect of Sky Fiend Sect was a branch sect which had survived the collapse of the Deviling Sect. The Deviling Sect was a famous sect 3,000 years ago. There had been many disciples and many branch sections. The Deviling Sect had all died in the great battle against the Yama 3,000 years ago, but many of these branch sects had luckily survived. However, without the Yin beads, the various spells they had learned from the Deviling Sect were useless. This caused some branches to decline and eventually die out. Some branches, of their own initiative, learned spells from other sects and managed to survive. The Sky Fiend Sect that Wen Tai Sanren came from was one of the surviving branch sections. Sky Fiend's sect was a very small sect. As it passed down to his generation, only he was left. However, Wen Tai Sanren was exceptionally talented. Even though the scriptures of the Sky Fiend's sect weren't anything special, he had managed to cultivate to Jindan. However, he had reached a dead end in his cultivation and it would be hard to make progress relying on these scriptures. So, it could be understood just how joyful he was when he saw the Yin Thunder bead in Yun Xia Xianzi's hands. He knew where his sect's scriptures had originated from. The sect records had many spells relating to the Yin beads. Those strange scriptures and spells, they were hundreds of times better than the scriptures was currently using. If he could find the method to make Yin beads, he had hopes that he could break through to Yuanying. For Xiuzhe, the strength of cultivation directly determined their lifespan. Jindan was the first division. Before reaching Jindan their lifespan wouldn't surpass 150 years, but once they broke into Jindan they would have a lifespan of 300 years. Yuanying Xiuzhe would have a lifespan of 500 years. The lifespan of a Fanchu Xiuzhe could reach 700 years, and the lifespan of a Desheng Xiuzhe was 1,000 years. On the surface, Wentai Sanren didn't seem any different than any other middle-aged person, but he was already 232 years old. He didn't have much time left. So when he learned that someone knew how to make Yin beads, how could he not be excited? He quickly found out the history of the Yin thunder bead that Yunxia Xianzi had, and he had sent Shui Yun to bravely go to the free market to search for the Yin beads, while he would hide in the shadows. For the temptation of the Yin beads, he was willing to not just cut ties with Yunxia's group, but if he had to pay with his life, he had to grab it. When Zuemo had appeared, he was excited but kept his composure. He was clear that the news of the Yin beads had spread out long ago. There were many people who wanted it. He was like an experienced hunter, patiently waiting. To be able to use a normal scripture to break into Jindan, Wentai Sanren wasn't the average cultivator. The situation quickly progressed according to his plans, everyone attacking in a melee battle. As the heated battle reached its climax, he finally made a move. Using his most skilled and hidden movement method, he silently appeared behind Zuemo. When his hand touched Zuemo's shoulder, even if he was an experienced hunter, he couldn't help but be excited. Wentai Sanren had fortuitous encounters before. When he had been a Ningmai, he had discovered an earth-based concealment method that was extremely unique. Relying on this, he had escaped life-threatening situations multiple times. He knew he had succeeded. Damn you! The yellow-robed Taoist was the first person to detect Wentai Sanren and instantly yelled. He didn't attend to his fight with the other Xiuzhe and threw out a round gold shuttle. Once the round gold shuttle left his hand, it turned into a streak of gold light and hummed as it moved. The silver-clad male snorted and tossed a handful of silver sand, which shone like the stars, towards Wentai Sanren. The dark red rope moved like it was alive. A nimble turn and then it streaked towards Wentai Sanren, shooting like a sharp arrow, howling through the air. The other person also seemed rushed. The pale green flying sword brightened and with a clear hum, sliced at Wentai Sanren. For Jindan masters attacking at the same time, the resulting commotion was enough to make the sky turn dark. Wentai Sanren wasn't panicked. A smug smile appeared at the corners of his lips. Grabbing Zuemo's shoulder he was going to cast his greatest escape spell, an earth concealment spell, when his face suddenly changed. With a painful shout, he suddenly tore his body away and retreated. On his palm, at some unknown time, a dark red flame had appeared. The flame wasn't large as it burned silently, but just in an instant, Wentai Sanren's right hand had turned to white bone. Ah ah ah! Sharp yells rang over Dongfu. Wentai Sanren's pupils were dilated, his features horrific and twisted as he curled into a ball, continuously rolling on the ground. This sudden change also shocked everyone else. Zuemo raised his head and reached out with his right hand, a finger gently pointing into the empty air. A strand of crimson flame silently floated in front of him. The round gold shuttle of the yellow-robed Taoist, the silver sand of the silver-clad male, the dark red rope, and the pale green flying sword all headed towards the dark red flame, like moths attracted to a flame. The expressions of the four people changed drastically. Just now, they had felt their talismans and flying sword had suddenly been affected by the pull of a very strong power and headed towards the silently burning crimson flame. The state of Wentai Sanren, who was rolling on the ground as he wailed piteously, also shocked everyone. The expression of the yellow-robed Taoist changed as he rapidly cast a spell, wanting to retrieve the round gold shuttle, but the gold shuttle only wavered slightly but still flew towards the flame. The silver-clad male was much smarter. Without another word, he retreated out of the battle. The mysterious master who had been using the dark red rope also had a good response. The rope, which had been like an arrow, suddenly slowed. Only the flying sword glowing with green light increased its presence as it sped up rather than slow down. The sword essence was thick, full of the resolution to not return. The gold shuttle and the silver sand, when they came into contact with the flame, was like mud entering the ocean, and disappeared without a sound in the fire. The cultivator who had been controlling the dark red robe tried with all his power and finally stopped the rope from moving forward, yet the tip of the rope still came into contact with the flame. Snap hiss. A string of sparks, with astounding speed, leapt on the rope and headed to the other end. The cultivator who had been hiding in the shadows was alarmed. Abandoning his rope talisman, he released it and retreated. Turning into a streak of light, he fled away. When the sparks lit up the other end of the rope, bang, the dark red rope turned to ash, scattering in the wind. The green flying sword, with its murderous sword essence, accurately struck the flame in front of Zhuo-Mo's chest. There wasn't any resistance. The flying sword split the flame into two. But at the same moment, the Xiuzhe who had been glaring angrily in the sky suddenly spat out a ball of fresh blood, and in alarm, turned and retreated. The sword essence on the green flying sword had completely disappeared. The body of the sword had broken into tiny segments and turned to countless fragments. The yellow-robed Taoist finally lost his composure. Without being able to care for anything else, he fled in a panic. The sudden change in the situation caused all the Xiuzhe in the free market, visible or hidden, to gape in shock. When Tai Sanren, who had been rolling on the ground, had turned into a pile of dust with nothing remaining. In a short encounter, 5 Jindan masters, 1 dead, 1 wounded, 3 fleeing, how much power would this take? Everyone's eyes as they looked at Zhuo-Mo all changed. The people who had been tempted by the Yin beads all felt relieved that they hadn't also attacked. The enormous free market was completely silent. There was only a crimson flame burning in front of Zhuo-Mo's chest. Zhuo-Mo reached out with a finger. The flame turned into a string and burrowed into his finger. Xiao Huan's complexion was deathly pale, her mind dazed as she stood. Her mind was completely blank. She didn't even register Zhuo-Mo's departure. Only after a long time, when her mind finally refocused, she saw Miss Paleface, and couldn't resist anymore but fall into Miss Embrace and started crying. Just at this time, 2 Yin beads dropped to the ground. Mistress and servant couldn't help but be shocked. Zhuo-Mo flew forward quickly. His eyes were dark, even the blade-like smile on his face seemed to have become weak. He had leapt and flew away without anyone daring to stop him. Not one person dared to pursue him. That wasn't right. He suddenly stopped. A white-clothed Lin Qian appeared behind him. At this time, Lin Qian didn't seem as casual and harmless as when Zhuo-Mo had first encountered him. All the Ling energy in his body was moving. He was like an unsheathed sword, the sword essence spreading out. His expression was grave. He didn't dare to relax as he stared fixedly at the figure that he couldn't really make out. Zhuo-Mo gave a light laugh. Haha, you're pretty brave. The voice was icy. Even though it was a laugh, it didn't have a hint of emotion. If Zhuo-Mo was conscious, he definitely would identify it as Pu Yao's voice. Pitiful Zhuo-Mo. In the near-death situation just now, Pu Yao finally couldn't help but interfere. Lin Qian's position didn't change. His expression was defensive, positioned so he could release his strongest attack at any time. In a deep voice, he asked, Elder's cultivation is astounding. But why would you not let others see your true face? Pu Yao stared at Lin Qian, the mirth on his face even thicker. Little friend, I don't have time to play with you today. But don't worry, we will meet if there is a chance in the future. Nonsensically, he threw down, so interesting. Ha ha. Before the words landed, a ball of flame rose from his feet. Lin Qian was first taken back and then shouted, Elder, wait. Disdain appeared in Pu Yao's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in the air. It was like Lin Qian was released from a heavy weight. He stood in his original spot. Only now did he realize that without noticing, his back was wet with sweat. How long has it been since he had been as nervous as this? Suddenly, his expression flickered and he disappeared in the wind. Just after Lin Qian disappeared, a group of people arrived at the location. It was a group clothed in black wearing masks. The person at the front suddenly came to the spot that Pu Yao had been standing and touched the ground with his hand. The patch of ground didn't seem different at all. We're not wrong. The short words were filled with joy. But then he said in irritation, "It is a pity we're late." The crowd of black-clothed people shifted in response but no one spoke. This one has always been curious. "What are you searching for?" A light voice landed in the ears of this crowd of black-clothed people like lightning on a clear day. The expression of all those people changed as they turned quickly. A white-clothed Lin Qian raised his feet and, step by step, neared them. "Can you tell me who the elder that was just here really is?" His expression was indifferent, but between his brows, the sword essence was thick. Chapter 79, Zhuo Mo's decision. Zhuo Mo opened his eyes and instantly let out a wail of pain. His body felt like someone had taken a short blade and scraped all over. It was excruciatingly painful. Was he at home? What time was it? Zhuo Mo struggled up while shaking his dizzy head. He had gone to Dongfu and bought a lot of things. His gaze landed on the 100 treasures pouch. Right, and then after that, he had gone to the free market. Zhuo Mo's pupils suddenly shrunk. He remembered. Yin beads. It was yin beads, those horrifyingly strong xiuzhe. Zhuo Mo reflexively touched himself. Even though his entire body was in pain, he was completely unharmed and wasn't lacking any arms or legs. He was still alive. He remembered he had suddenly fainted. What happened after that? How did he return to the Little West Wind Yard? He didn't know. Did someone rescue him? This was the first idea that appeared in his head. Even though he didn't know much, but he wasn't dumb. The forest of signs in the free market was enough to make him realize the value of the yin bead was much larger than he had imagined. Those people would have no reason to let him free. He hurried to flip through his 100 treasures pouch. When he saw the yin beads were still there, he was even more confused. He took a count and found that there were 2 less. Whichever way he looked at it, it seemed strange. He suddenly realized he could ask Pu Yao. That guy definitely would know what had happened. When Zhuo Mo entered the sea of consciousness, he was instantly shocked. The furiously dancing sea of flames of the past was now withered, the flames extremely weak like the embers left after a fire and could extinguish at any time. The 2 stars were unchanged, hanging like diamonds in the void. The sword river didn't change either, same as usual, half of it icicles moving, half of it burning with water flames. Why would it be like this? Restraining the terror in his heart, Zhuo Mo started to sprint in the direction that Pu Yao was usually at. He had a strong feeling inside that something major had definitely happened. When he reached the stele and saw Pu Yao on top of the stele, he was dumbstruck. Pu Yao's face was without any color. He was like a statue as he sat, legs coiled, on the stele, motionless. Black clouds moved around his body. Pu! Zhuo Mo tried to control the terror inside and called out. Pu Yao didn't respond. He was like a stone statue carved out of white marble. Zhuo Mo called a few more times. Pu Yao didn't seem to hear it. Something definitely had happened. Zhuo Mo forced himself to calm down. He carefully thought back to what happened that day. Yin beads. And then he connected it to Pu Yao's present state. What happened that day, it was obvious. In the eyes of high-level xiuzhe, low-level xiuzhe was like grass. When he had saw Shui Yun, he knew that he wouldn't be able to resolve it and that was why he decided to go all in. People would kill for even a low-level talisman, how about the mysterious yin bead? Most of the yin beads he had were still present. That meant that those people hadn't got them. Had it really been Pu Yao who saved him? Zhuo Mo almost couldn't believe it. Would Pu Yao be that kind? Yet this guess seemed to be the most reasonable one. As to Pu Yao's sorry state right now, Zhuo Mo wasn't certain. Was he wounded? It seemed that it was quite serious. Even that time Pu Yao had been wounded by Xian Yen Shibua, he hadn't been this weak. Looking dazedly at Pu Yao, who was completely lifeless, Zhuo Mo suddenly thought, would Pu Yao just die like this? But for some unknown reason, he pushed down the idea. This thought made him feel slightly terrified. Terrified that Pu Yao would disappear like this? Wasn't that what he had been hoping all this time? Looking at the lifeless Pu Yao, Zhuo Mo's eyes became murky. He closed his eyes. A beat later, he opened them again. Gu wouldn't owe anyone. He was only paying back the other for saving his life, Zhuo Mo told himself. For some unknown reason, when he made this decision, the terror inside suddenly stopped. Raising his head to glance at the statue-like Pu Yao, Zhuo Mo took a deep breath. He started to think back to every detail of his interactions with Pu Yao, hoping to find a way to help him. The first thing he thought about was embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Pu Yao had been constantly tempting or forcing him to practice embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Zhuo Mo remembered very clearly, it had been when he had broken through to one breath that the flame sea in his consciousness had become vigorous. Looking at the weak flames that were so weak now that it seemed as though they would extinguish at any time, Zhuo Mo felt these crimson flames should have a very close relationship with Pu Yao. The second was Jingshi. Pu Yao always needed a lot of Jingshi. The great majority of Zhuo Mo's Jingshi would end up in Pu Yao's hands. Zhuo Mo had always been slightly amazed by the great appetite Pu Yao had towards Jingshi. Even though Zhuo Mo didn't know where Pu Yao spent the Jingshi, but it was clear that Jingshi was very important to Pu Yao. Maybe it helped Pu Yao somehow. And then it was yin energy. Zhuo Mo could still see the picture of Pu Yao furiously taking in yin energy on that trip to the Sword Cave. Zhuo Mo felt that, for Pu Yao, yin energy was something enriching and should help him. After a long time, Zhuo Mo concluded these 3 points. In these 3, the most difficult was yin energy. To take in yin energy, that needed going into the Sword Cave. When Pu Yao was conscious, entering the Sword Cave was just a matter of Jingshi. But relying just on Zhuo Mo, the difficulty of entering the Sword Cave was very high, and basically hopeless. Up until now, only Wei Xingxixiang had been allowed by the sect into the Sword Cave. For everyone else, even though Zhuo Mo had comprehended the Li Water Sword essence and showed his talent, the elders in the sect didn't even mention it. Zhuo Mo put his attention on the first 2 points. In his perspective, those 2 were more practical. He decided to go to the rock room to meditate and practice embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Just as he was preparing to leave, he saw from the mirror that he hadn't changed his appearance back. He hurriedly washed away the disguise on his face. If someone came in right now, that would be bad. It had been a very long time since Zhuo Mo had been so focused when he was practicing embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. Even though he still persisted in practicing it every day, but he didn't put much thought into it. Now that he really paid attention, he instantly found many places he was unclear about but had dismissed usually. He couldn't help but feel guilty and reflect on himself. It was like he had gone back to the time before he had broken through to one breath as he furiously started to study this cryptic and dull scripture. People were always like this. When they needed time, they would find that time was abnormally slippery. If one wasn't careful, it would slip away. Coming out of his meditation state, the sky was already dark. Zhuo Mo went to take a look at the sea of consciousness. The flames were still very weak and didn't seem to have visibly changed. It seemed that it needed a long-term effort, he thought inside. Leaving the consciousness, he started to sort out the ling herbs that he had bought in Dongfu. These raw materials had been for him to experiment with the water method and to earn some Jingshi. He hadn't thought that they would be useful so early. Before, Zuemo had only wanted to experiment with making Dan using the water method. But he was now abnormally serious. In his speculations, Jingshi was one of the most important. He didn't know what help Jingshi gave Pu Yao, but it was one of the few things he could do. Zuemo couldn't help but grimace. It seemed that in his life, making Jingshi was an eternal problem. Throwing away that thought, he started to follow the instructions on Elder Wei Nan's jade scrolls and prepare the ingredients. The water method and the fire method were as different as the earth and sky. It was the first time Zuemo had come into contact with many of these things. But luckily, he had some Dan-making experience now. Before, the experience of making so many golden crow pills had also given him a lot of experience. The language that Elder Wei Nan's jade scroll was written in was straight and clear, without any flourishes. It wasn't hard for Zuemo to understand. This was also why Zuemo would always feel his mind expand and be entrance when he browsed Elder Wei Nan's jade scrolls, yet when he read embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, it was like his intestines were turned inside out and he felt that death would be welcome. Zuemo studied the basic steps in the water method many times. Even though he wasn't totally familiar, he wasn't unfamiliar with it. The uniqueness of the water method laid in that it required making a Dan embryo. The Ling Dan would be raised in the Dan embryo. The process was like people during pregnancy, extremely miraculous. The most important step of the water method was to use spells and Ling energy as channels, all kinds of materials and Ling grasses as the flesh in order to form a Dan embryo. It would not just directly decide whether a Dan would form, but any little difference could cause the Dan that would be formed to be completely different. This was one of the important reasons that the water method wasn't as popular as the fire method. It was even hard to grasp the patterns and trends involved. For Zuemo, this was undoubted a new challenge. Luckily, his present cultivation was much higher than Elder Wei Nan when he had first tried the water method. The writings of Elder Wei Nan was extremely detailed. Many important parts, he had repeated and narrated it over. And Zuemo had one advantage that Elder Wei Nan didn't have. Zuemo had spiritual power. His consciousness, not just Elder Wei Nan, but the Shixiang in the sect wouldn't be as strong as him. The benefits of using his consciousness had been crucial when he had been using the fire method. Taking the Ling grasses and herbs he had prepared, he went next to the Ling spring in the rock room. The Ling spring was extremely cold and was near the Ling vein. After so many years, the Ling energy in the spring was extremely dense. Along the way, Zuemo inspected the ice cloud grass that was being grown in it. Seeing that its growth was very good, he put it to the side. Focusing, Zuemo's hands was like snowflakes flying in the air. Some strangely shaped character seals that glowed slightly flew out of his hands and entered the Ling spring. When those glowing character seals entered the Ling spring, it was like there was a natural attraction between them and they slowly crowded together. Zuemo stared with wide eyes unblinkingly, the speed of his hands not slowing down. As Zuemo's finger motions changed, the glowing character seals in the Ling spring slowly moved. Like putting together puzzle pieces, the character seals slowly combined together. 2 whole hours, and Zuemo was soaked in sweat, mist coming off his body. His eyes didn't dare to move away. With the finger motions that kept on changing, Zuemo's fingers were extremely sore. But he could only grit his teeth and bear it. If he was the slightest bit lacking in attention, it meant that all his effort would be wasted. When the last glowing character seal went in, a steady, embryo frame took form. A light blue light suddenly appeared and flashed around the surface of the seal characters. Zuemo didn't dare to hesitate. Without any time to wipe away the sweat, he used a specialized spell to add in the pre-prepared materials. A while later, a light blue spherical Dan embryo quietly floated in the Ling spring. Chapter 80, A Transformation on the Gravestone. 5 days of rest passed in the blink of an eye. Waiting for Xian Yen Shirbua's harsh training, Zuemo accidentally found out that Shirbua had left on other matters and his training would be temporarily halted. Without anything else to do, Zuemo could only go to find Master, but strangely, she was also absent. He quickly discovered that the sect leader was not present, and neither was Yen Leshurbois. What had happened? Of course, Zhou Mo didn't know that Pu Yao's exceptionally strong display completely shocked Sky Moon Jie. One encounter, 5 Jindan masters, 1 dead, 1 wounded, and 3 fled. Such terrifying strength, it was shocking to hear about. Jindan level Xiuzhe, in Sky Moon Jia they were high-level masters that could be ranked and counted, but they were so weak against that person. This incident also was connected to many sensitive matters. Bright Wave Jia quickly responded. Almost all the high-level Xiuzhe in Sky Moon Jia cooperated fully, and Wukong Sword Sect naturally couldn't stay out of it. Even without Xian Yen Leshurbois' supervision, Zhou Mo didn't dare to relax. If he didn't practice Vajra Profound Sutra, the one who would suffer would be him. He decided to stay in the little West Wind Yard and focus on cultivating. Pu Yao was still a statue, motionless. The flames in the sea of consciousness were still very weak, as though they would extinguish at any time. Only a few days later did Zhou Mo, from the sound tablet, learn that Dong Fu had almost been flipped on its head, and learn what Pu Yao really did. When he heard of the dark red flame, he knew undoubtedly that it was Pu Yao. This guy didn't even inform him before taking control of his body. Zhou Mo felt hatred. And Pu Yao's glorious victory of 1 against 5 made his jaw drop. Stars in daylight, a strong and mysterious fire Xiu, the long-lost Yin bead. A string of complex incidents made Sky Moon Jia abnormally lively. But these didn't have much to do with Zhou Mo now. Right now, he didn't dare to run out. If someone accidentally found out, he shuddered at this thought. He docilely stayed in the little yard, working hard on embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, and Vajra Profound Sutra. Compared to profound and cryptic, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, Vajra Profound Sutra, progressed much more quickly. Zhou Mo could clearly feel his body was much stronger than before, even though he still looked thin and weak on the surface. There wasn't any movement from the Dan embryo in the Ling Spring. Master's ban hadn't been raised, so he could not go to the Dan room of Fragrant Ginger Yard to make Dan. But, all things considered, it was actually good. He could sort out and reflect on everything that happened recently. He hadn't had the time to look at the jade scroll that Liang Feng Shiji had given him before about Jinji. He could take the time now to study it. The Jinji in West Wind Valley needed to be constructed again. Otherwise, if the rock cave was accidentally discovered, it would be a huge blow to him. To learn Jinji, that required learning formations. Formations was something every cultivator had to learn. Forging, dan making, seal writing, etc., etc. All of those were related to formations. The disciples of the large sects would start learning formations in Lianqi in order to form a strong foundation for their road of cultivation. But for small sects, it was basically very hard to accomplish this, Wukong Sword Sect included. After experimenting for a few days, Zhou Mo raised the Jinji again. After he just finished constructing the Jinji, he saw a pink paper crane flying out of the sky. Yi, I've been very bored recently. You need to find something to do. But I don't know what to find to do. What does Yi do every day? Cultivate. Cultivating every day, how boring must that be? Other than cultivation? What else does Yi do every day? Other than cultivation? Zhou Mo was stuck. Other than cultivating, what else did he do? He thought for a second and then wrote, make Dan. Yi is so boring. Zhou Mo suddenly was slightly irritated. Barely restraining the irritation, he wrote 3 words, yes, very boring. After a while, there finally wasn't any paper crane that was flying over. Zhou Mo released a breath. It seemed the other person had been adequately blown away by his bland response. He returned to the stone room and started his boring cultivation. In the rock room, Zhou Mo opened his eyes. His progress in embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation was extremely slow recently. It still seemed very far away from reaching third breath. He entered the sea of consciousness, wanting to check on Pu Yao. Pu Yao was still motionless like a statue. Zhuo didn't know what to do. His own strength was extremely small. He wanted to help but had no method of helping. He was preparing to leave when he suddenly stopped in his steps. He abruptly turned and stared in disbelief at the gravestone under Pu Yao. There were words on the gravestone. There were words on the gravestone. Before, he could only barely make it out, but never had he seen it clearly. But this time, he saw it clearly. He hurriedly went closer, inspecting the words on the gravestone. But after a few seconds, he was struck dumb. What was written on the gravestone was none other than Vajra Profound Sutra. After practicing Vajra Profound Sutra these recent days, he was extremely familiar with the entire scripture. After reading a few lines, he realized what it was. Why would Vajra Profound Sutra be on this? Zhuo found it very strange. If it had been some cryptic and profound scripture carved on here, he wouldn't be shocked. Vajra Profound Sutra wasn't some high-level scripture. Zhuo himself guessed that it would be 3rd grade. Such a mysterious gravestone having Vajra Profound Sutra on it really was a strange and puzzling thing. Pushing down on the curiosity inside, he read it down character by character. Quickly, he discovered something. This Vajra Profound Sutra was slightly different from the Vajra Profound Sutra that he was practicing right now. Some places, there were additions, some places, some things were changed. Was this the true Vajra Profound Sutra? Zhuo couldn't understand. Vajra Profound Sutra wasn't a high-level scripture. Even if it was modified, it couldn't possibly become a high-level scripture. As he thought, Zhuo smiled self-mockingly. He was really too greedy. For a long time, the gravestone had been mysterious in Zhuo's eyes. He had unconsciously assumed that if this gravestone was connected to a scripture, it would certainly be a strong and profound scripture. So when he saw Vajra Profound Sutra on it, he was shocked. Thinking about it, he decided to memorize the Vajra Profound Sutra on the gravestone. When he finished memorizing the text, a scene that made him gape in shock occurred. The characters on the gravestone suddenly disappeared. The black clouds that had dissipated quietly gathered again and once again shrouded the gravestone. Was it, this gravestone was telling him that he was practicing Vajra Profound Sutra wrong? He shook his head hard and threw such the strange notion to the back of his head. In any case, it was normal for anything related to Pu Yao to be strange. Leaving the sea of consciousness, it was like Zhuo was enchanted as he started to study the 2 different Vajra Profound Sutra. The gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra was only different in 5 places from his previous version. Just 5 places. These 5 places, he studied for a long time, and made a very startling conclusion. The difference in these 5 sentences, it let this Vajra Profound Sutra walk onto 2 different roads. Other than shock, Zhuo felt it was expected. If there wasn't a difference, he would actually find it strange. But after a deeper examination, Zhuo was shocked once again. Because he found, the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra wasn't as good as the Vajra Profound Sutra that he was practicing. Zhuo was slightly unable to accept this conclusion. Pu Yao was an antique, but what he gave, like embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, it could be seen it was a high-level thing. The gravestone that appeared together with him, how can it give a Vajra Profound Sutra that wasn't good as the normal version? Zhuo didn't believe it. He continued his examination. There wasn't much complex content in Vajra Profound Sutra. The main focus of the entire text was to cultivate the body. The method of the Vajra Profound Sutra Zhuo practiced wasn't complicated. It was using the Ling energy inside the body to temper the body. And the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra was using the Ling energy that was in the world to nurture the body. Undoubtedly, the Vajra Profound Sutra that Zhuo was practicing was much more effective. Even in the rock room with the Ling vein, the Ling energy in the air was far from being able to compare to the pure Ling energy in Zuomo's body. Even more, strengthening was much more effective than nurturing. And the strength of the body that was produced by tempering was much better than a body that was nurtured. What was this? Zuomo felt that this was a joke. Was the gravestone joking with him? As he thought, he felt it was more and more likely. Otherwise, how would there be such a coincidence? He had just practiced Vajra Profound Sutra, and then the gravestone showed Vajra Profound Sutra. Was it that Puya wasn't as seriously wounded as he thought and was toying with him? Or Puya was lying under the gravestone already? With Puyao's sense of humor, Zuomo wouldn't be surprised if he didn't do anything strange and preposterous. Zuomo threw the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra to one side. Such an ineffective method, it was wasting time. But the change in the gravestone aroused Zuomo's attention. Every day, he would go into the sea of consciousness multiple times to see if the gravestone had any new changes. What he felt regretful about was, after that, the gravestone didn't change. A quiet gravestone, a quiet Puyao. Zuomo was slightly disappointed, but still persisted in practicing every day. But every time he would practice Vajra Profound Sutra, he would always unconsciously think about the 5 places that were different. Those 5 unfamiliar sentences were like a ghost haunting him, appearing in Zuomo's mind. Quite a few times, he had almost practiced the gravestone version but managed to stop himself. Time was valuable. He couldn't deliberately waste it, Zuomo thought. Practicing embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation finally showed hope for Zuomo. He had almost completely disregarded the furious increase in his cultivation in the recent days. Looking at the slightly more vigorous flames in his consciousness, his mind lightened. It seemed he hadn't guessed wrong. He believed, as long as he persisted in practicing embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, there would be a day that Puya would wake up. In the recent days, all the elders of the sect were absent. Zuomo received a rare time of idleness. Each day, he cultivated and worked hard, time full and free. After a few days, the Ling Dan in the Ling Spring would be complete. Zuomo now had a deep experience of how slow the water method was. Suddenly, he heard someone yelling loudly outside the valley, Swishixiang, Swishixiang. The voice was extremely frantic. Zuomo felt it was slightly unfamiliar. It should be one of the outer sect disciples. His body flashed and he appeared at the mouth of the valley. The heads of the outer sect disciples were pouring with sweat as they panted, expressions frantic. Seeing Zuomo, they instantly had a joyous expression. Shi Xiang. People have come to the sect to make a disturbance, and they wounded a few of the shitty. Chapter 81, Linging Sect. When Zuomo rushed to the entrance of the mountain, he found the situation was much more serious than he had initially thought. 2 distinct groups of people surrounded the mountain gate. Zuomo's gaze swept across the crowd of people that caused the disturbance. The ones who aroused Zuomo's attention was 1 female and 2 males. The clothing and composure of those 3 were clearly different than the people behind them. When Zuomo saw Old Black had been wounded, the anger in his heart shot up. In a stride, his body flashed and he appeared next to Old Black. Blood was seeping out of the corners of Old Black's mouth, his expression was withered. When he saw Zuomo, joy made its way across his face. What happened? Zuomo asked in a heavy voice. The spirits of the Wukong Sword Sect's disciples rose when Zuomo appeared. Oh, finally, there's one that is willing to stand up, one of the 2 males among the trio who was wearing a grandiose blue Ling armor said in a strange tone. I had assumed that the inner sect disciples of Wukong Sword Sect are a group of turtles. Hey, kid, give us your name. Where's Wei Sheng, why hasn't he come out? Zuomo didn't pay attention to him, only looking at Old Black. Old Black's face was full of bitterness. They said they wanted to find Wei Sheng Shixiang to spar, but how can Wei Sheng come out? So they started making a ruckus. They said if Wei Sheng Shixiang isn't going to come out, they would ruin the Ling fields here. Think about it, how could I let them ruin my Ling fields? Zuemo took out a medicine pill from his clothes and shoved it to Old Black. He was a pupil of Shi Feng Rong, at the very least, he didn't lack medicine. The surrounding disciples all had admiring expressions. Putting Old Black into the care of the outer sect disciples behind him, Zuemo turned around. So it's a zombie face. Hey, you're that Zuemo. The male wearing the blue Ling armor arrogantly waved a finger and said, I heard that you are skilled at making Dan. You won't be enough, go find Wei Sheng. The first genius of Dong Fu, hiding. He really isn't anything. Isn't there also someone that was called something like Luo Li? Which sect are you from? Zuemo calmly asked. He, we are from the Lingying sect. The one who answered was the only female among the three. She wore pink peach blossom armor. Her body was extremely graceful, sweet and youthful, lights flashing in her eyes. Almost all of the gazes of Wukong Sword Sect's outer sect disciples were greedily locked on her. She wasn't embarrassed, instead she was covered in smiles. Zuemo had heard of the Lingying sect before, it was the wealthiest sect in Dongfu. The sect had numerous enterprises, and the disciples they admitted were mostly those of wealthy families. Unlike Wukong Sword Sect, they had an astounding number of disciples. Just the number of Zhuji disciples in Lingying sect was over 80 people. This number threw Wukong Sword Sect far behind them. They were first among Dongfu. However, the reputation of the Zhuji disciples of Lingying sect were extremely bad. What they liked to do the most was causing trouble. Many of them had a strong family background and would cause trouble in other sects, yet the other sects could only bear it. They formed groups and made trouble everywhere. Because they consumed Ling medicines from childhood, the progression of their cultivation was much faster than normal disciples. And because they were covered in talismans, if fighting occurred and they threw it down, how could normal disciples win? And if the other was stronger than them, then they would attack at once. After a while, lower-level shoujo would walk around them. But they were also smart and would never provoke those truly strong people such as Yubai. They had heard that a strong person had come out of Wukong Sword Sect called Wei Sheng. He had been labeled by many as a once-in-100 years genius. They naturally wouldn't dare to cause trouble at large sects such as Dong Fu Hall and Dong Qi Sword Sect. But this Wukong Sword Sect, they had never heard of it before. A small sect like this, they weren't afraid at all. Due to the fact that Dong Fu had been very lively this recent while, the elders of all the sects had almost all left. Such a good chance, how could they give it up? Before coming, they had especially done research. In this generation of Wukong Sword Sect disciples, the most famous was two people. The first was Wei Sheng, the second was Zuemo, who was skilled in dan making. But no one had ever seen how strong Wei Sheng was. This made them even more certain that Wei Sheng only had an inflated reputation. As to Zuemo, a dan maker, what waves could he make? Other than that, there was someone called Luo Li, but he was supposedly average. There were three people, the one wearing the blue Ling armor was called Yan Mingzi. The other wearing an eye-catching bright red Ling armor was called Hu Shan. The name of the female wearing the pink peach blossom Ling armor was called Tao Zhuer. Oh, Zuemo expressionlessly responded. He then turned to ask Old Black, who wounded you? Ha, there's no need to ask, ye did it, Yan Mingzi said disdainfully, you should go get Wei Sheng to come out. You only make Dan, ye is almost embarrassed, the voice suddenly stopped. Yan Mingzi stared with slight shock at Zuemo. In his eyes, this little zombie in front of him seemed to suddenly change into a completely different person. That feeling, it was like a sword that was now unsheathed. It wasn't the first time that Yan Mingzi fought and caused trouble. He was very experienced. He dropped his mirthful expression, and said somewhat seriously, hadn't thought that I would not see clearly. You are actually a master. The other two were also surprised. The presence Zuemo exuded definitely didn't seem like a cultivator who was obsessed with dan making would have. But the two weren't very worried. They had hung out on the streets for this long, and the number of hard bones they had encountered couldn't be counted. Many people were more powerful than them, but weren't they all defeated in the end? Even more, this little zombie had lower cultivation than them. Zhuo didn't waste words and raised his ice crystal sword. Ha! You are really poor. Yan Mingzi roared with laughter and said with a smug face, "Take a look at Ye's flying sword." The sword was 3 feet, shaped like an elongated water droplet. The body of the sword was like the surface of a pond, dark and the bottom unfathomable. Occasionally, a streak of light would flash past and display the extravagance. The sword's name is Water Drop, 3rd grade, and the highest quality of water element flying sword. He examined Zhuo and shook his head. Everything on your body isn't even worth a fraction of this flying sword. Zhuo completely lost the desire to converse with the other. Without another word, he attacked first. Flowing water, of Li Water Sword Scripture. An invisible ripple spread out in front of Zhuo. The ice crystal sword seemed to disappear and then appeared out of nowhere in front of Yan Mingzi. Yan Mingzi only seemed to see a blur before the other's flying sword suddenly was in front of him. The sword essence contained in the tip of the sword was so sharp he almost couldn't keep his eyes open. He jumped in fright. He hurriedly manipulated his flying sword to parry. The other's flying sword seemed abnormal slippery, and with a smooth curve, it nimbly avoided his flying sword and came straight at him. Yan Mingzi was in a panic, but his battle experience was much richer. He knew that the other's flying sword wasn't as good as his and decided to go for a frontal encounter. Zhuo snorted coldly. It might have been that he had interacted for too long with Pu Yao that his snort was very similar. He knew what the other was thinking. However, the quality of his ice crystal sword was far lesser than the other. If the two hit, the one who would suffer would be him. He only had this flying sword. If it was damaged here, the sect definitely wouldn't give him another one for free. But Zhuo's skill with Li Water Sword Scripture was far better than in the past. The teachings of Xian Yan Shibua had covered many of his shortcomings. The Li Water Sword Scripture that he casted now was smooth and flowing, almost traceless. The sword scripture that the other used was also abnormally special, but it was clear that the other hadn't focused on practicing it. He wasn't able to capture the essence of many of the details. Based on the details, the other's sword scripture was slightly above Li Water Sword Scripture. Zhuo couldn't help but shake his head. Such a good sword scripture, but the other didn't know to treasure it. He was also extremely tempted by the other's flying sword. In comparison, his ice crystal sword was extremely cheap. In reality, what Zhuo minded the most was the other's water drop sword was just perfect for Li Water Sword Scripture. His ice crystal sword was appropriate for Xian Yan Shibua's sword essence but wasn't suited for Li Water Sword Scripture. Zhuo had been thinking for a long time about obtaining a flying sword suited for Li Water Sword Scripture. His heart moved and he couldn't help but have an idea. The ice crystal sword became even harder to follow. His sword moves still followed the path of entangling and intricacies. But in all of this, there was a slight hint of explosiveness, and was full of murderous intent. This little bit of explosiveness caused Yan Mingzi to feel the pressure had increased greatly. This dissonant feeling made him extremely uncomfortable. Hu Shan and Tao Zhuer's faces were full of surprise. Yan Mingzi was in a disadvantageous position. They had to re-examine Zhuo. This Zhuo is pretty strong. Tao Zhuer's voice held surprise, different than the rumors. Didn't they say he was skilled in dan-making? The information on Wukong sword sect is already very pitifully little. How could we have researched that clearly? Hu Shan said unconcernedly. Even though he was surprised, but he was only just surprised. If Zhuo could have this kind of strength, then how strong would Wei Xing be? Tao Zhuer wondered. Hu Shan smirked. It doesn't matter how strong they are. They have become too well known recently. Many of the Shixiang and Shiji have noticed them. Supposedly, the Shishu also do not have good feelings about Wukong sword sect. Tao Zhuer smiled. Yes, Dong Fu is only this big. A new one that is coming to divide it. How could the miserly Shu of the sect be willing? Hu Shan said indifferently, in any case, it isn't our problem. But I heard that their elders are pretty strong. They're strong, but are they as strong as Jingshi? Tao Zhu Er gave a light laugh. Ha, right. Hu Shan laughed. As the two talked, the battle situation changed. Yan Mingzi suddenly didn't dodge anymore. The ice crystal sword pierced his Ling armor. It gave a clear ring but didn't leave a mark on the Ling arm. Zuo couldn't help but pause. During his period of distraction, Yan Mingzi's water drop sword suddenly attacked. It was like an icy water sword. Zuo hurriedly turned his body. He felt a gust of coldness brush past his arm. Ha! Just a second-grade flying sword, how can it break through my black water Ling armor? Yan Mingzi laughed smugly, his sword presence become even more bold. Tao Zhuer didn't seem surprised at the scene occurring and felt it was boring. She couldn't help but say, only knowing to use status to bully others, it's so boring. As she talked, she organized the petals on her peach blossom Ling armor. A smirk was on Hu Shan's face as he watched the ice crystal sword strike Yan Mingzi's Ling armor again. It was useless, don't you understand? If you want to blame someone, just blame it on the fact you weren't born into a good family. He looked with some sympathy at Zuo. Yan Mingzi didn't seem to have any hint of dodging. He was very confident in the Ling armor he was wearing. But when the soft and weak ice crystal sword just touched the black water Ling armor, a change suddenly happened. Chapter 82. If people don't get ill-gotten gains, they won't be rich. A burst of dense sword essence flowed into the Ling armor and silently snuck into Yan Mingzi's body. Yan Mingzi only felt an extremely cold needle suddenly burrow into his body. His body instantly froze. Light flashed in Zuomo's eyes as he found the opportunity he had been waiting for. With a short bark, he started, Vajra Profound Sutra, silently. A faint layer of gold suddenly floated on his sky. His legs suddenly pushed and like an arrow, his body shot out. Yan Mingzi's expression suddenly changed. But his body was still frozen. What spell was this? Zuomo's goal wasn't Yan Mingzi but the now uncontrolled water drop sword that was floating mid-air. It really was a good sword. The gold-glowing right hand grasped the handle of the water drop sword and the Ling energy inside his body flooded inside the water drop sword. As expected, joy made its way inside Zuomo's heart. The other hadn't put much effort into imprinting the sword. The bit of consciousness inside the water drop sword was pitifully weak. Zuo easily erased it. The water drop sword shook 2 times in Zuomo's hand before becoming motionless. It took a lot of time and countless effort to slowly imprint a flying sword before it would be easily controlled, and also, to not be easily stolen by others. Some strong people would construct layers of Jinji inside the sword. If a person would try to steal the sword like Zuo did, they would be wounded instead. But Zuo had guessed that this person wouldn't spend a lot of time imprinting the flying sword. He had guessed correctly. This change occurred very quickly, so quickly everyone gaped, the surroundings deadly silent. Yan Mingzi was dumbstruck. He had never thought that the other person was targeting his water drop sword. When he felt the connection he had to the water drop sword disappear, his expression changed dramatically. Zuo contently put the water drop sword in the 100 treasures pouch at his waist. His mood was great. He assumed a proper composure as he said to Yan Mingzi, this sword, it will count as the price you pay for offending our sect. Next time, don't do something as silly as this. What he had just used was the tidal sword essence of Xian Yan Shibua, extremely yin and extremely cold. Without any defenses, Yan Mingzi had taken a huge blow. You, Yan Mingzi's fingers shook as he pointed at Zuo, his face pale, so angry he couldn't talk. But he didn't have the water drop sword anymore and couldn't do anything to Zuo, ha. This is so funny. Hu Shan laughed heartlessly, covering his stomach. He was laughing so hard he almost couldn't breathe, old Yen, haha, it's so funny. Even your sword was stolen, old Yen, you're definitely the first in our sect. Hee hee. Brother Yen, you're too amusing. Tao Zhu'er laughed, looking like a flower and unable to stop. Yen Mingzi didn't know what to say. But when he saw Zhuo Mo's eyes sweep across the Ling armor on his body over and over, his heart jumped and he hurried back a few steps. He had lost in a muddle. Even now, he didn't understand why he had suddenly froze. What spell had the other used? Today, he really had been humiliated. Yen Mingzi's heart bled blood. The sound of Hu Shan and Tao Zhu'er's laughter was abnormally dissonant. He had lost great face. Even if they would defeat Zhuo Mo together and he would take back the water drop sword, when they returned, Hu Shan and Tao Zhu'er would certainly spread this incident far and wide. If the sword was lost, then it was lost. But if this incident passed back to the sect, he wouldn't be able to keep his head up ever again. He wasn't someone kind. He was angrier at Hu Shan and Tao Zhu'er than at Zhuo Mo. He was very shocked at Zhuo Mo's skills. He couldn't understand at all. He looked at the two people who were bent over in laughter and smirked inside. Those two definitely wouldn't have detected what had happened. The paralysis just now, it was completely silent, without a hint of warning. After thinking it through, he calmed down. He purposefully said in an enraged voice, Hu Shan, haven't you been yearning for my blue three-eyed python? If you take back water drop sword for me, I'll give it to you. Hu Shan didn't laugh anymore. He tilted his head, and seriously looked at Yen Mingzi, really? Yen Mingzi smirked inside. On the surface, he nodded rapidly, of course, with Tao Zhu'er as witness, will I not pay up? Okay. Hu Shan's face was happy as he sniffed, old Yen, you couldn't even beat trash like this, you have really deteriorated. You have to practice more. Otherwise, when I bring you out to make trouble, wouldn't you lose the face of our Linging sect? Yen Mingzi hated Hu Shan for saying such ugly words. Inside, he hoped for Zhuo Mo to turn Hu Shan to minced meat. His mouth went, wait until you get water drop sword back before you waste words. Hu Shan took a step out and smiled widely at Zhuo Mo, you're an interesting guy. If you obediently give up the water drop sword, I'll let you go once. The meat that reached his mouth, there wasn't a reason to spit it out. Zhuo Mo was too lazy to respond to him. He examined Hu Shan. He suddenly discovered this was a glittering golden road to becoming rich. That water drop sword, it was extremely expensive. Don't think that Zhuo Mo had more money after learning to make Dan, but if this water drop sword was in the talisman stores of Dongfu, Zhuo Mo could only look at it. He definitely couldn't afford it. Now, it had landed in his wallet. If he converted it to Jingshi, he suddenly realized, what was faster than taking something? What was more enjoyable than justifiably stealing something? Zhuo Mo reached out with a hand. The ice crystal sword once again came in front of him. He said in a righteous voice, you dare to bully us Wukong. One-on-one, your Linging sect, Ji really isn't afraid. The disciples behind Zhuo Mo looked with admiration at him. As expected, when he provoked them, Hu Shan's expression wasn't happy, humph, the bottom of the barrel and really think you are something. I had originally thought to let you off, but since you didn't realize, a dash of silver light flashed in the air and landed in front of Hu Shan. Coward! Dare to use an ambush! Hu Shan was both shocked and angry. A blazing saber appeared in his hand. Flames danced wildly along the long blade of the saber, burning fiercely. Even far away, Zhuo Mo felt the incoming heat. It was another good talisman. Zhuo Mo's eyes turned red. This blazing saber, it definitely was the highest quality of the third grade and wasn't lower than the water drop sword he had just taken. He hurriedly moved the ice crystal sword away. Water and fire opposed each other and depended on which was stronger. Zhuo Mo was certain that if he wasn't careful and was trapped by the other's flame, the ice crystal sword would probably melt into a puddle of water. He had heard before that the scriptures of Ling Ying's sect was extremely broad. He hadn't thought that they would have something as rare as a saber scripture. The great majority of the sects in Sky Moon Jia were based primarily on cultivating the sword. It was very rare to find Xiuzha that practiced the saber. The other's blazing saber carelessly swiped, and there would be a burst of hot flame and air that opposed him. The road that Li Water Sword Scripture walked was the one of lightness and careful intricacies. However, the difference between the two talismans was too great. The ice crystal sword basically couldn't go near the other, and so the sword scripture naturally wasn't effective. The Ling armor on the other's body was also unordinary. Red light flashed, and made Hu Shan look like a god in a mortal world. Ha ha! Weren't you acting brave just now? Be brave. Hu Shan laughed, extremely pleased. The saber presence on his hand roiled and waves of flames chased after Zhua Mo as he jumped and dodged. Shock was on the faces of all the Wukong sword sect disciples, and they all retreated. The fire wave from Hu Shan's blazing saber was extremely hot. Everywhere it went, it left behind scorch marks. As they said, people died for wealth, birds died for food. Zhua Mo tragically thought as his brain calculated rapidly. The other's saber scripture was clearly less than Yan Mingzi's sword scripture, but in cooperation with this high-quality blazing saber, the power was astounding. Good saber, good saber. Zhua Mo's eyes was so red fire could shoot out as he made a sorry figure dodging about. The other's saber presence wasn't fierce enough. Otherwise, the fire waves could continuously come and Zhua Mo wouldn't be able to avoid it. It wasn't that Zhua Mo didn't have a solution, but that solution. Gritting his teeth, he decided to go through with it. But, even if he was going all in, he had to earn back his cost. As he jumped and dodged, his eyes scanned the other's body, looking for a target. When his eyes landed on the jade pendant that was hanging from the other's waist, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Good talisman. The jade pendant was of an old style of construction, the entire body constructed by a kind of red jade. There wasn't any impurities in the red. A black bead was encrusted in the middle. There were a few formations carved on the jade pendant. Zhua Mo recognized one of them. It was called a streaming fire core management formation. This was a formation that could increase the wearer's sensitivity to fire, and also increase their control over fire. The streaming fire core management formation was extremely useful. For low-level Xiuzha, it was something out of their dreams. However, the requirements for making the streaming fire core management formation were extremely strict. Zhua Mo couldn't bear to use it on a regular basis. This jade pendant was able to have a streaming fire core management formation, its quality wasn't ordinary. Zhua Mo deeply realized a phrase, when the profit was large enough, it was enough for people to risk it. All in. Zhua Mo made the decision and quickly calmed down. He needed to find a chance to knock out his opponent in one blow. The waves of fire turned. The flames on the body of the saber didn't seem as though they would become weaker. Hu Shan was completely protected by layers of flames. Zhua Mo couldn't get near. Zhua Mo was extremely sneaky. The waves of fire didn't even touch his hair. Hu Shan became slightly fidgety and the saber presence was even more rushed. This group of people, they really were wasting good things. Zhua Mo's heart was full of scorn. Such a good saber, landing in the hands of these people, it was a pearl in the hands of swine. The other's saber presence sped up. It seemed more dangerous, but Zhua Mo could detected that the other wasn't able to control all of it. After Zhua Mo had comprehended Xian Yan Sherbua's tidal sword essence, his perception of presence had become extremely sensitive. Due to his long-term practice of comprehending Li Water sword essence, it had deepened his understanding of presence. It was the same rationale for sword and saber essence. What they were after was strength used appropriately. It wasn't the energy used was more, the presence stronger, and so the power would always be greater. This was a chance. Zhua Mo's pupils suddenly shrunk. He accurately caught the other's minor weakness. Having waited for a long time, he instantly acted. The ice crystal sword that had been swimming beside him like a fish gave out a light sound. Traveling along the spot where the layers of fire were the thinnest, it pushed in strongly. Halfway, the ice crystal sword turned into an extremely cold stream of water. This wasn't due to being melted by the fire but the result of Zhuo-Mo actively and furiously pushing Ling energy in, metamorphosis. Metamorphosis was an upper-level trick of sword scriptures. Xin Yen Sherbu's ice dragon was a high-level metamorphosis of his sword. Zhuo-Mo's power right now wasn't enough for metamorphosis. Just having touched sword essence, he could only use the dumbest and the simplest way. That was, putting large amounts of Ling energy into the flying sword, pushing it to turn back to its original form and stimulating the power of its origins. It could only count as the lowest type of metamorphosis. Basically, no one would use this kind of metamorphosis, because after doing it, the flying sword was ruined. This was also why Zhuo-Mo had hesitated for so long. But after balancing the benefits and costs, he still decided to use this move. After making the decision, he didn't have any hesitations, no pauses. He had been preparing for a long time, acting it out repeatedly inside. How could he not have any chance of success? The ice crystal sword, now a stream of cold water, pushed through the layers of fire as its power increased. The cold energy was enough to freeze the surrounding flames. Hu Shan's face paled. He furiously moved the blazing sword, waves of fire continuously forming in hopes that they would block this extremely cold water. However, Zhuo-Mo had planned for such a long time, had even paid the price of ruining the ice crystal sword. How could he stop there? Chapter 83, Brute Force. Just as Hu Shan was furiously waving the blazing saber, the cold water that had pierced the flames suddenly exploded, turning into 7 streams and landing around Hu Shan. The 7 streams were thin, filled with a white cold energy. They revolved rapidly, hissing as they moved. 7 whirlpools. 7 bunches of cold energy and sword energy formed whirlpools. They were like the pillars of a cage, imprisoning Hu Shan. The whirlpools were moving shocking fast, like a miniature tornado. It had a strong suction power. Everywhere it went, the layers of flames were consumed so nothing was left. Shock appeared on Tao Zhu'er and Yan Mingzi's faces as they stared in disbelief at the battle. The other sect disciples who were behind Zhuo-Mo were extremely excited and were intoxicated by the fight. Terror made its way onto Hu Shan's face. Surrounding him, 7 groups of water and fire entwined to become long whirlpools. They were like 7 thin pillars that securely trapped him. The bang and hiss of water and fire meeting signaled just how unstable it was and expressed the terrifying power that was in them. No! Hu Shan shouted in hopelessness, his left hand quickly going into the 100 treasures pouch at his waist. Boom! The 7 fire and water whirlpools exploded at the same time. The pitiful Hu Shan, who just had taken out an armor seal, was swallowed by countless flames and tiny icicles. The explosion dissipated, leaving behind smoke which faded as people made out Hu Shan's state. That grandiose red Ling armor was now dim and dirty, a layer of ash over the top. There were many small marks on the surface of the Ling armor. Hu Shan's tied-up hair had been blown into a bird's nest, his face ashy and black. Some strands of lingering smoke rose up from his face and head. The flame had completely disappeared from the blazing saber on his hand, nothing remaining of the presence it previously had. His right hand holding the bottom half of an armor seal that he didn't have the time to use. His entire person was charred like burnt wood. The jade pendant actually hadn't been damaged at all. Zhuo-Mo released a breath. He silently started Vajra Profound Sutra, and cautiously walked in front of Hu Shan. Glancing at Hu Shan and seeing that the other didn't seem to have responded, Zhuo-Mo wasn't courteous as taking off the red jade pendant at Hu Shan's face. After taking it, he looked with some regret at the blazing saber on Hu Shan's hand and the Ling armor on his body. Those two were also good things. However, Zhuo-Mo knew that people couldn't go over the line. Right now, he took the jade pendant. That was his prize for winning. It wasn't outrageous. However, if he cleaned off the other person, then he could just wait for them to come back and kill him. Also, Zuo didn't let down his defenses. His left hand had always been inside his own 100 treasure pouch, touching the water drop sword that he had just obtained. He hurriedly left behind his own imprint. Even though, in this short amount of time, he couldn't imprint the sword and could only leave behind the simplest impression, but the ice crystal sword had been destroyed and he had no weapon. The other was also not just one person. Ha ha! Yan Mingzi saw that Zuo had taken Hu Shan's jade pendant and couldn't stop himself from laughing smugly. He was very clear just how much Hu Shan treasured his jade pendant. Seeing Hu Shan had lost more than time, his damage even greater, Yan Mingzi recovered his sense of equilibrium. He didn't seem to find it so painful anymore at losing the water drop sword. Looking at Hu Shan's sorry state, Tao Zhu'er also couldn't stop herself from giggling. But her eyes as she looked at Zuo had some more shock and curiosity. Hu Shan slowly came back. Seeing Zuo right in front of him, hatred rose, and with a hateful shout, raised the saber to cleave the other in half. Zuo, who had already had his defenses up, attacked even more quickly. Like lightning, he reached out with his gold-glowing right hand, and accurately grabbed Hu Shan's neck. Then he gave a hard pull. Crack! A muffled sound like a head hitting a rock. Hiss! The sound of inhales rose in the surroundings. Everyone looked dazedly at Zuo. Their mouths were wide. They had completely lost the ability to speak. Still a little bit painful. Zuo bared his teeth and then threw the unconscious Hu Shan on the ground. His right hand rubbed hard at his forehead. His forehead was perfectly unharmed, and on Hu Shan's forehead, a bloody flower was blooming. How hard would he need to be before a flying sword couldn't wound him? Zuo thought as he rubbed his glittering forehead. But he was quite satisfied. He hadn't wasted the pain and effort he put into training his body. Still want to fight? He asked Tao Zhu'er. In reality, when he asked this, he was not very confident. But his zombie face that could not show any emotion was like that of a skilled master. Additionally, Tao Zhu'er had completely been amazed by Zuo's abnormal attack. At this time, she didn't know what to answer with. If you don't want to fight, take him away. Gu is very busy. Zuo took the opportunity to stop the other's words. He waved his hand, turned and made to leave. Wait! Tao Zhu'er suddenly called him. Zuo's heart jumped. Did she still want to fight? Right now, his flying sword had been destroyed. If he wanted to control the water drop sword as he wished, it couldn't be done in such a short amount of time as this. He had also used up the majority of Ling energy in his body. What else do you want? He turned and pretended to ask discontentedly. Wukong's sword sect, as expected, is strong. But since you have put down a challenge of one-on-one, us Ling Ying sect disciples will naturally battle to the end. In the future when we ask for guidance, please do not avoid. Tao Zhu'er stared at Zuo and stated. She had to admit they had been caught off guard today and lost to the other. But Zuo's expression, which looked as though he didn't think anything of them, how could these arrogant and brash wastrels swallow it? However, if she had to go up, she didn't dare to. This person in front of her, she couldn't seem to see him clearly. Especially Zuo's last head attack. Humph, such a fun thing, how can it be just the three of them that played? Tao Zhu'er thought cunningly. She believed that many people in the sect would be interested. At this time, Zuo couldn't wait for those people to leave immediately. He didn't even think, waved his hand to send them away. Fine. Finishing, he turned around. With the admiring gazes of the outer sect disciples behind him, he floated away. This time, he didn't hear Tao Zhu'er speak again. Zuo finally released a breath. Tao Zhu'er bit her lips. She had never been dismissed like this, had never been hurried away like this. Sometimes, the hatred of a woman would germinate from a very small detail. Just wait. she thought hatefully. Zhuemo returned to the little west wind yard and caressed the 2 talismans he took. They were really good things. The more he looked, the more he liked it. He really profited today. As to the consequences, they were completely thrown to the back of his head. In his mind, these 2 fine 3rd-grade talismans, they were worth anything. After recovering his Ling energy in the stone room, Zhuemo started to imprint the water drop sword. As he carried out the imprinting, he discovered that the water drop sword lived up to being the finest among the 3rd-grade flying swords. The body of the water drop sword was extremely soft and could curve in any direction. It also contained an extremely large amount of black water. In reality, it was a water sword. The Ling energy could reach every part of the sword, and due to its softness, Zhuemo was able to, through manipulating Ling energy, change the shape of the flying sword. It was as though it had been custom-made for Li water sword scripture. From the time he got it, other than imprinting it, Zhuemo put it in the Ling spring in the rock Rome. The Ling energy of the Ling spring was lively and rich. To put it in there and slowly nurture it, it was especially helpful for increasing the nimbleness of the water drop sword. As for the jade pendant, Zhuemo wore it every day. He finally understood the formations on the jade pendant. The jade pendant had 3 formations. Other than flowing fire core management formation, there was also clear heart incantation and Ling gathering formation. Nothing needed to be said more about streaming fire core management formation. Clear heart incantation nurtured the mind, and Ling gathering formation could gather the Ling energy in the surroundings and was very practical. If Zhuemo didn't have the Ling vein in the rock room, Ling gathering formation would definitely be one of the formations he wanted to get the most. The Ling gathering formation on the jade pendant was just the most basic Ling gathering formation, but the effects were extremely evident. When Zhuemo wore the jade pendant as he meditated in the rock room, the efficiency would increase by 1/10. Don't underestimate the 1/10. Accumulating over time, the gap it caused was extremely large. Ling gathering formations were one of the most well-studied formations. At the same time, it was also called the formation that was created through Jingshi. It consumed large amounts of Jingshi. So for the simpler, Ling gathering formation, it wasn't as practical as taking Ling energy from the Jingshi. But if it had to be constructed on the jade pendant, other than needing the forger to be knowledgeable about the Ling gathering formation, but the material it was constructed on had to be able to gather Ling energy already. Materials that could gather Ling energy as one of its attributes, all of them were extremely expensive. On this jade pendant, the most valuable was this nondescript Ling gathering formation. It was even more valuable than the streaming fire core management formation. Just this Ling gathering formation, it was enough to elevate this jade pendant into 3rd grade. It was a pity that he couldn't make Dan right now. Otherwise, he really wanted to try out the effects of the streaming fire core management formation. Zhuemo probably wouldn't have thought the incident of him defeating the troublemakers of Ling Ying's sect would have more of an effect with the outer sect disciples than his battle with Luo Li in the sect assessment. For outer sect disciples, the person who was stronger would make them respect him, but the Shixiang who was willing to protect them and their profits, he would be more loved by them. This battle, Zhuemo had received great experience. Actually, based on cultivation, he didn't have much of a difference than Hu Shan and Yan Mingzi. He was even slightly weaker than them. The reason that he could win came from the fact that he had comprehended sword essence. Regardless of whether it was Xian Yan Shirbua's title sword essence or the Li water sword essence, his understanding of the sword scripture, of presence, far surpassed the others. Combined with the others' underestimation of him, that was how he had so easily won. Otherwise, the person who would have lost would have probably been him, especially if Hu Shan had used the armor seal just a step earlier. Thinking about it, Zhuemo couldn't help but rage. Was this group of people fighting? They were just throwing Jingshi. He pretty much was drooling at the grandiose talismans. They could carelessly use things like an armor seal. He felt pain on their behalf. Squanderer. They were truly squandering everything. What also caught Zhuo attention was Vajra Profound Sutra. No matter if it was against Yan Mingzi or Hu Shan, Vajra Profound Sutra had been very effective and pivotal in battle. It seemed that he had to put more time into Vajra Profound Sutra. This thing wouldn't just save his life. It seemed to have other effects as well. But when he thought about Vajra Profound Sutra, he remembered the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra. The 5 bits that had been modified haunted his mind and would pop up occasionally. Especially when he was practicing Vajra Profound Sutra, he couldn't stop himself from thinking about the 5 different parts. It drastically impacted the efficiency of his practice. Why don't I try it? Zhuo thought hesitantly. Chapter 84. For Jingshi, looking at the dark gold skin covering his entire body, Zhuo couldn't help but give a pinch. As expected, the mechanism of the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra and the Vajra Profound Sutra that he had practiced before were completely different. With the previous version of Vajra Profound Sutra, his skin had glowed with a bright gold shine. Right now, his skin was dark gold. The bright gold skin had been as hard as steel when pinched, while the dark gold skin was like a metallic leather, softness within the hardness. The Ling gathering formation on the jade pendant had been of great benefit to Zhuo. It caused the density of Ling energy in the surroundings to increase significantly, and was very beneficial for practicing the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra. Feeling the difference between the two, Zhuo decided to practice the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra for a longer length of time before examining the differences. He had a feeling that the mysterious gravestone wasn't so simple. In his sea of consciousness, Pu Yao was still motionless. The gravestone was also deadly silent, and the flames were weak. However, what kept most of Zhuo's attention recently was the Ling Dan in the Ling Spring, which was almost completely formed. This moisture dan was the first time Zhuo had tried dan making using the water method. Naturally, he was slightly nervous. Luckily, nothing unexpected had happened during the process. The moisture dan was successfully made. He carefully examined the moisture dan. The Ling Dan was like a pink pearl, extremely adorable. This moisture dan, it was the Ling Dan of countless women's dreams. Zhuo had asked about the price. A first-grade moisture dan like the one in his hand, one of them was worth 1/3 grade Jingshi. This price far surpassed many normal first-grade Ling Dan. However, this time wasn't the best opportunity to sell the moisture dan. He was still afraid when he thought about what occurred with the Yin bead. He guessed that this fear wouldn't be disappearing anytime soon. It was hard for this terror to be shaken off. Considering how loud the incident in Dongfu had been, he was worried that some people would have tracked the purchases he had made. It would be very dangerous to sell the moisture dan right now. His own strength was still very weak. In any case, making the moisture dan was practice. Dan making was a topic of study that required large amounts of practical experience. The sound tablet was continuously broadcasting the news of Sky Moon Jie. The incident of Dongfu had ended. There was news that the Xiuzhe from Bright Wave Jie were gradually leaving because they had investigated for a while and hadn't found any traces. In this recent period, several fierce conflicts had occurred in the surroundings of Dongfu, and the mortality rate had been extremely high. After those sudden conflicts, the chaos of Dongfu finally calmed down. Zhuo couldn't help thinking that there was something going on behind the scenes. However, it was clearly not something a Zhuji cultivator like him could understand. Listening to the sound tablet, other than it being a habit, he paid close attention to the changes in the prices of goods. Recently, the price of all kinds of ling grasses and herbs on the market had been constantly increasing. This had caused the price of all ling dan to increase as well. Before, Zhuo certainly would have been very happy. This was the time that ling plant farmers could show their value. As a ling plant farmer, his advantages in the area of ling plant farming was extremely visible, especially after he entered Juji. Right now, as one person, the ling fields that he could take care of were more than the total of 20 outer sect disciples. Additionally, the two were not even on the same level when it came to output. On the other hand, he could pursue more attention-intensive farming and plant ling plants of higher grades. However, the reality was, no matter in which area, he was stuck in a very awkward position. First was the ling fields. Wukong's sword sect did not have many low-grade ling fields and had basically been divided by the outer sect disciples. If Suemo wanted to rent them, it required squeezing out many outer sect disciples. Having deeply experienced the harsh life of an outer sect disciple, Suemo was naturally unwilling to do that. And all the ling fields of slightly higher grades, the sect had given to Fragrant Ginger Yard. Could Suemo try to take ling fields from the hands of his master? 20 mu of third-grade ling fields. In the past, Suemo would have felt that it was a lot, but right now, he felt that there wasn't enough. Yet there were just these many ling fields in the sect. There was no way around it. Wukong's sword sect wasn't a sect that was famous for its farming. Pei Yuan Ran and the others had never thought that the sect would have a ling plant farmer. Suemo saw enormous profit in the ever-increasing prices of all materials in the market. It was all Jingshi. But, a clever wife would be tripped by no rice. Without ling fields, he didn't have anything. His skills could not be used. He needed to find some ling fields, Suemo decided. For some unknown reason, he kept on having a feeling of doom. It might have been that Pu Yao had once said, "A war is starting," or maybe he was thinking too much. Pu Yao, that old antique, it wasn't the first time he had spoken nonsense. Out of caution, he still decided to try to increase his cultivation. Before, due to the existence of the ling vein in the rock room, Suemo had never thought of using other methods of increasing his cultivation. He had even sold the ling grains that the sect gave him each month for Jingshi. He had also never thought of making ling dan that would be of benefit for his cultivation. He would always choose ling dan that was the easiest to sell and had the greatest profit margins. Coming back to it, he hadn't learned dan making long ago. This question was quite difficult for him. When he had the free time, he needed to study it, Suemo thought. He was struggling with a problem, Jingshi. He desperately needed Jingshi. On one hand, he hoped to help Pu Yao. On the other hand, what was more painful than watching a good business opportunity slip away in front of his eyes? This was like staring at a neatly ordered army of Jingshi boldly march past him. Master's band still rang in his ears. However, Suemo still bore up against the pressure and went to Fragrant Ginger Yard. He disregarded the astonished gazes of Su Qing and the other female disciples. At least, Suemo didn't show any timidness on the surface. Right now, he was the first-ranked person in Fragrant Ginger Yard other than Master. Naturally, no one dared to stop him. He would accept being punished. Suemo's eyes were teary as he started to make golden crow pills. Right now, his cultivation had increased, and adding on the streaming fire core manipulation formation, his efficiency at making golden crow pill was astonishing. When Suemo, eyes full of enlarged blood vessels, took a large batch of golden crow pills and found Li Yingfeng was dumbstruck. She hesitated for a beat and asked, "Shitty, weren't you banned from dan making by Shirgu?" Suemo had a grimace as he said, "I lack Jingshi." Realization appeared on Li Yingfeng's face. She didn't ask any further, nodding her head and said, "This batch of golden crow pills will sell easily. I can give you a down payment of Jingshi to you first." "Many thanks, Shiji." Suemo was very grateful. Li Yingfeng smiled, "But when Shirgu comes back, you won't be able to escape being punished." Suemo spread his hands helplessly, "There's no way around it." After thinking for a second, he decided to remind Shiji. Shiji could try to buy some raw materials about now. Li Yingfeng looked in shock at Suemo and then suddenly smiled, didn't think that Shidi is also concerned about business. Shidi, don't worry too much. The sect has already hoarded enough materials. Especially dan-making materials. Master had started hoarding a long time ago. Suemo was relieved. That seemed correct. A problem that even he could see, someone as clever as Yen Lesherbois, how could he not see it? Zhuo Mo's heart was steadied by the sect's proactive approach. He was paid 20 pieces of third-grade jingshi from Liang Feng. Taking this enormous sum of wealth, Zhuo Mo didn't feel very happy. He only felt that time was even tighter. The market prices had risen again. This was undoubtedly a strong signal. Give it to Pu Yao. Zhuo Mo gritted his teeth. Okay. But then, he paused. How would he give it to Pu Yao? Usually, Pu Yao would do it himself and rob him of jingshi. Zhuo Mo didn't have any way to take jingshi into his consciousness. Pu Yao, it's not that GE doesn't want you to use it. Zhuo Mo, mind at peace, put away the jingshi. After some thought, he decided to rent a Ling garden. Due to the climate of Sky Moon Jia, it was very suited for farming, so there were many Ling gardens. But many of the Ling gardens, especially those with Ling fields above 3rd grade, they always lacked people to farm them. For Ling fields of 3rd grade and above, it needed somewhat professional shouja to farm them. Otherwise, it was too much of a waste of resources. Normal shouja were not able to pay the huge rent. Sky Moon Jia was primarily sword xiu, and the number of Ling plant farmers were pitiful, so there were many empty Ling gardens. The owner of the Ling garden in front of him was chattering on, "Don't worry, I won't cheat you. This Ling garden isn't big, but the Ling energy is dense and it is all 3rd grade Ling fields. The air is very humid and sun exposure is appropriate. It is suited to farming all kinds of Ling grasses and herbs. It would be a pity to just farm Ling grains." How much for a year? Zhuo Mo asked straightforwardly. 15 pieces of 3rd grade jingshi. The other answered resolutely. Accepted. Zhuo Mo, whose wallet had just bulged, responded briskly. He was trying to steal time right now. 200 mu of 3rd grade Ling fields, it was enough for him to work with. Now that the Ling fields had been rented, it was a question of what to plant. Since it was 200 mu of Ling fields, he couldn't pay as much attention and care as he did for the Ling fields of West Wind Valley. Luckily, this Ling garden was not far from Wukong's sword sect. He needed time. Zhuo Mo's eyes were entirely red and extremely motivated. In the end, Zhuo Mo picked a Ling grass called fiery red flower that was used very commonly in many healing Lingdan. It also grew extremely quickly. The turnover was very quick and easy to sell, it was just perfect. Zhuo Mo planted a whole 180 mu of fiery red flowers. The remaining 20 mu, he planted 3 kinds of slightly rare Ling herbs. This 20 mu was to increase his cultivation speed. Speaking of how to speed up increasing cultivation, there were many methods, but the majority was related to jingshi. Of the ways, the best was to just take in the Ling energy inside jingshi. This could dramatically increase the speed of cultivation. However, it requires special methods to resolve the domineering nature of the Ling energy of the jingshi. In comparison, Zhuo Mo felt that it was more practical to find a way in dan making. Most of what he could make presently were 1st and 2nd grade Ling dan. His success rate with 1st grade Ling dan was relatively high. It was hard to say about the success rate of 2nd grade Ling dan. There were very little low-level Ling dan that could directly increase cultivation. As the Ling grasses and herbs in low-level Ling dan were also low-grade, their effects were very limited. Zhuo Mo had been able to find a few that he needed in the records room of Fragrant Ginger Yard, like the Bone Tempering Dan, to change the flesh, the Evil Removing Dan, for removing impurities of the body. The effects of these obscure Ling dan were not major, and the effects were all those that were not prioritized by Sword Xiu. Zhuo Mo didn't have any room to choose. Bone Tempering Dan, and Evil Removing Dan, didn't have great effects, but he thought that if it was used together with Vajra Profound Sutra, it would have some effect. The other than that, what he placed importance on was Spirit Increasing Dan. Its effect was also obscure. It could increase the consciousness of shouja. Zhuo Mo decided to use it in combination with embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. He didn't know if it would help. These obscure Ling Dan, there wasn't any place that sold it in Dongfu. It was a pity that couldn't find Ling Dan that could directly increase the speed of cultivation. Upon further thought, he found it normal. If those Ling Dan were easily made, one could just eat Dan all day. However, Zhou Mo depressedly found that the 3 Ling Dan he had put so much effort into picking, had 3 kinds of rare ingredients that he couldn't buy. Luckily, he managed to buy the seeds and had planted down 20 mu. Chapter 85. Coming up to the door, Zhou Mo had just finished sorting out his just-rented Ling garden and dragged his exhausted body back to the little west wind yard. But when he saw the pink little thousand crane, he wanted to faint. Could she not torment him? Zhou Mo wanted to cry. But this situation wouldn't change based on his wishes, he could only adjust to it. Yi, it's so boring, let's play a game. Zhou Mo wanted to reply with, Gu really isn't bored. But taking into account the other's strange fondness for fireworks, Zhou Mo was extremely calm and intelligent in returning, I don't know how to play games. He felt he wasn't lying to the other. He really didn't know how to play games. Games, to him, it was so strange that it was like he didn't even know the word. His life, from the moment he opened his eyes, it was determined that he couldn't leisurely play games and live a life. But the other was very kind in not looking down at him and said, that's all right, I'll teach ye. Zhou Mo gave his last struggles, I'm dumb and can't be taught. But, just like previous times, the other didn't give him any room to rebel. Consequently, Zhou Mo saw a string of about 8,000 characters of game rules. This time, Zhou Mo really fainted. Such difficulty, for someone like him who didn't like games, it really wasn't something he could complete. He only read a few words before deciding to give up. He persisted, I'm really stupid. But considering that the probability of enraging the other was too high, he weakly added another sentence, how about you find the simplest game? This time, what reached his hand was a set of game instructions about 200 characters. Zhou Mo's mind couldn't help but jump. Wasn't this a formation problem? He read it thoroughly again and finally was certain that this was really a formation problem. Formations was an area of systematic study. Zhou Mo, located in a small sect, naturally didn't have any experience. However, in some large sects, the disciples would learn formations. From the simplest simple Ling formation, to yin-yang formation, compound formations, and gradually increasing the difficulty. This was an extremely long process of study. To help disciples with learning, some shoja skilled in formations had created a set of methods to learn formations. Included in the methods were all kinds of formation problems. Like corrections, fill in the blanks, optimization, etc. There were many kinds. Over time, some shoja enjoyed the process and were infatuated, creating even harder formation problems. Between many disciples, they used them as games. Zhou Mo had never played this before and felt it was very interesting. The formations that were used were not complicated. Zhou Mo had learned them before. However, the problem was extremely tricky. He couldn't help but fall into thinking. The other seemed to know that he was thinking and didn't hurry him. Thinking for a long time, he didn't figure out anything. Zhou Mo shook his head hard and recovered some clarity. He couldn't help but gape inside. Did those large sect disciples play like this? He couldn't help but admire them. No wonder they were so strong. Even the things they played with were this powerful. However, he decided to put this game down first. There were many things he still had to do. Games, it was fine to play when he had free time. In any case, that damned woman hadn't hurried him. Zhou Mo went into the stone room to practice embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, and the gravestone version of Vajra Profound Sutra. After cultivation, he took out the water drop sword from the Ling spring. With the nourishment from the Ling spring, its sheen was clearer than before. Zhou Mo caressed the water drop sword and then started to imprint it. One flying sword, it needed a long time to imprint it before it could move like a part of the body. And to have it move according to one's thoughts, the time needed was even longer. The flying sword was like a sword shio's partner. The longer they were together, the more chemistry they had. Sword shio wouldn't easily change a flying sword. This point, especially after reaching Jindan, it was even more evident. These days that were spent imprinting it, he didn't waste his efforts. Right now, Zuo could move the sword like it was a part of his body. It was of a higher grade than ice crystal sword and was even more nimble. Zuo's mind moved and the water drop sword in his hand jumped into midair. At the same time, he gave a shout and jumped up from the ground. The sword flashed and moved easily. In midair, a flame that seemed to be made out of water gave off a faint light. The places the sword passed, a stream of water flames burned silently. Zuo seemed to be drunk. Using the water drop sword to practice Li water sword scripture, it was truly an experience. When he reached the peak of his enjoyment, Zuo didn't follow the sword scripture anymore. The sword couldn't be detected as he moved, and the sword seemed to carry a few hints of the explosive Li water sword essence in the calm, and it still spread like waves. The sword essence, which had been light and wave-like, gradually turned heavier and pressuring. When it moved with great force. The explosiveness, which had been barely perceivable, started to burn like fire in the wind. Still as cool as before but containing a strong explosiveness. Those two conflicting feelings gathered together, but Zuo didn't seem to feel it and wasn't uncomfortable at all. On the water drop sword, the light fire-like sword energy gradually started to retreat inside. When Zuo woke up from his epiphany, he finally realized, without him noticing, his Li water sword scripture had went up a level. There wasn't much joy. He stood there silently, finally savoring it. He wasn't clear himself what level his Li water sword scripture was at now. Li water sword scripture wasn't some high-level and profound scripture. Even its creator wasn't some powerful sword shio. It was quite unusual that Zuo could master a sword scripture like this to this level. However, Zuo needed to explore the road ahead by himself, because the Li water sword scripture that he had practiced ended here. Even though the creator had written some of his speculations and frameworks for the future, many of those had been rejected by Pu Yao. Based on profoundness, Li water sword essence was far from the tidal sword essence Zuo had secretly learned. However, this was Zuo's own comprehension and the sword essence he had the greatest grasp on. His understanding of Li water sword essence far surpassed tidal sword essence. Maybe, he could look and study tidal sword essence and change Li water sword scripture. Zuo's heart moved. But he only thought about it. He wasn't so proud to the point of changing a sword scripture. Also, his understanding of tidal sword essence was just a hair. At this time, he suddenly detected that someone was outside the valley. The person who was there was very docile and hadn't set off the Jinji. Mouth of West Wind Valley. Shixiang, Linging sect's people came again. The messenger was still the outer sect disciple that had come last time. However, there wasn't any of the fear that had been on his face last time, but excitement. They came again. Zuo was dazed. Yes. The disciple said respectfully. He couldn't disguise his excitement. This time, 5 people came. Zuo instantly felt his scalp prickle. 5 people. Last time, 3 had come. Now this time, 5 people. Zuo wanted to turn and run. They hadn't given up, and called to spar with Shixiang. This outer sect disciple completely didn't notice Zuo's shift and said excitedly, "This group really doesn't know their own weight." Cough. Zuo forced himself to come and swallowed. He asked, "Who came this time?" "The 3 from last time are all here, and 2 that I don't recognize." Zuo's heart calmed down lightly. Good, at least, it wasn't that all 5 were people he didn't know. 2 people who had lost to him. He had completely reason to disregard them. The woman, she hadn't dared to fight that day, so this time, she definitely wouldn't act rashly. The headache was those 2 that he didn't know. Since the others had come to settle the score, they certainly would be stronger than the last two. His mind turned quickly. Inside, he was very hesitant. Should he go or not? He was slightly regretful that he had said too much previously. He asked, "Where's the other Shixiang? You can't bother just me every time with this kind of matter." Eldest Shixiang and Shiji are all outside. Luoli Shixiang is in seclusion. Su Yi Shixiang is forging and has ordered not to bother him. Hao Min Shiji is being punished. Only Su Yi Xia Shiji is free. Should I notify her? That woman. Dislike instantly rose in his heart. Never mind. If she was notified, the probability that this woman would do something behind his back was very high. Fine. Thinking about the new comprehension he just got from Li Watersword scripture, Zhua Mo was instantly full of confidence. He had just learned something, and some people just came over for him to test it on. This Lingying sect really was full of good people. After thinking it through, Zhua Mo didn't retreat anymore. He nodded and said with great composure, "Go." This outer sect disciple was instantly excited and hurried forward to lead the way. When they reached the mountain gate, Zhua Mo instantly staggered when he saw the dense crowd. Why are there so many people? This outer sect disciple was extremely excited. Everyone heard that Lingying's sect had come and all ran over to personally see Shixiang win and teach a lesson to Lingying's sect's new money. But why are there female disciples as well? Zhua Mo asked speechlessly. Must be coming to admire Shixiang's elegant demeanor. Goosebumps instantly rose over Zhua Mo's entire body. Seeing Zhua Mo come out, the crowd of female disciples shrieked. Zhua Mo almost tripped. Wow! Shixiang is so handsome. Please. It's called cool. When Shixiang was in the outer sect, I knew then that Shixiang wasn't an average person. Really want to seduce him, I will kill you. Large black lines fell over Zhua Mo's expressionless face. He decided to stay a bit further away from this crowd of crazy women. When Zhua Mo started walking towards the side with male disciples, the male disciples also expressed their emotions. Shixiang, kill them. Chop them. Chop into 8 pieces, cut of their hands and feet, pluck their tendons, break their channels, cut them up, so uncreative. Half to sunflower, Zhua Mo rapidly distanced himself from these people that were completely sunk in fighting spirit. In the short journey of traveling through the female and male disciples, Zhua Mo, who had been full of fighting spirit, almost became completely lacking in the desire to fight. Of course, in the eyes of everyone else, Zhua Mo Shixiang was stepping resolutely, with a cool expression, and extremely elegantly passing from their side. But when Zhua Mo saw the even worse expressions on the faces of the 5 people from Lingying's sect, his mood instantly became better. Chapter 86, Wen Fei, good day everyone, Zhua Mo raised his hands in a greeting. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's expressions instantly became slightly uglier. Good. Good. After they returned to the sect, they had been greeted with scorn and mockery. Tao Zhuer covered her mouth and giggled. Mirth appeared on the faces of the 2 Lingying sect disciples, but the 2 managed to restrain themselves. Lingying sect had the largest number of inner sect disciples in Dongfu. At the same time, because they lacked a strong leader, the disciples fell into factions and the complexity of the inner sect was also the first in Dongfu. Tao Zhuer moved gracefully, her beautiful features instantly attracting everyone's eyes. Wukong sword sect's outer sect disciples quickly divided into 2 camps. The male disciples stared, some of them dazed, as they drooled. Jealousy rose up in the female disciple camp, shouts of "whores" and "fox demon" came out. Tao Zhuer gave a beautiful smile, this little sister admires Zhua Shixiang's demeanor last time. However, as a disciple of Lingying sect, I cannot watch as our sect's reputation is injured and have come today to specially visit Zhua Shixiang. The other said it so nobly but Zhua Mo sneered inside. This female might have a good appearance but she was as poisonous as a scorpion. If one wasn't careful, they would fall into her hands. Zhuo, having seen her laugh so heartlessly when her fellow disciples were defeated, didn't have a good impression of her. Oh, nothing changed on Zhuo's face. Adding on that his face was tilted down, it was even harder for others to guess his thoughts. Tao Zhu'er instantly felt that her fist had hit cotton. Such an indifferent response, she didn't know what to say. But she wasn't a simple person. She took a step back and revealed the two other Shixiang, stating, "Wen Fei Shixiang and Ming Dao Shixiang are truly skilled disciples of our Lingying sect, and are people this little sister admire very much." Coming this time, hearing this, Wen Shan and Ming Dao instantly couldn't help themselves from raising their head proudly and pushing out their chests, evidently they were very smug. "If you want to fight, then let's fight," Zhuo suddenly opened, interrupting her. "However, our Wukong mountain isn't a place you can come and go whenever you want. Let's say the ugly matters first. Whoever loses to me, I will take a talisman from them to prove our sect's reputation." The words were said righteously. The Wukong Sword Sect outer sect disciples all cheered. Hearing this, the two people's expressions became discontent. Wen Fei was clothed in green and white. A green soft cloth tied on his head. This made him look extremely elegant, as though he would leave with the wind at any time, almost like an immortal. He wasn't satisfied to be on the weak side and smirked, "Fine, fine. If you have the ability, this one naturally will recognize the loss." Wearing blue Ling armor, and hair tied with a gold coronet, Ming Dao also spoke, "If you lose, I will also take a talisman from you." Tao Zhu'er stood in the back. Seeing the two sides about to fight, a smug smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's eyes were blood red as they stared at Zhuo. They looked as though they wanted to eat him alive. "Who is first?" Zhuo asked as he stepped out a step, his presence soaring. It might have been that he had just practiced the sword. He felt his entire body was hot, his blood on fire, as though he was being roasted. The desire for battle suddenly erupted, moving restlessly as though it wanted to burst out of his body. Like a keen sword unsheathed, the sharp edge flashed into view. One step, and it was as though Zhuo had changed into a whole other person. The dullness that was on the surface and the slyness inside his bones seemed to have completely flown away. Desire for battle flowed on his body. It was tangible, so pure that others could not disregard it. Tao Zhu'er looked dazedly at Zhuo. The expression on her beautiful face was like she had seen a ghost. How was this possible? Was this still that vulgar and greedy zombie? In her mind, Zhuo had a greedy and cheap character. Otherwise, who else would target someone else's flying sword in the middle of battle? Being defeated last time, especially by a little person like him, this was why Tao Zhu'er was so persistent. Getting tripped up by an opponent that she looked down on, how could she accept it? But, the Zhuo in front of her. Seriousness made its way into Wen Shan's eyes. The presence that the other exuded surprised him. However, he wasn't the kind of wastrel that Hu Shan and Yan Mingzi were. His family might be rich, but he was very hardworking and did have some true abilities. He was shocked but not afraid. Taking a step forward, he declared, "I'll fight." Wen Fei revealed his talisman. A light green jade fan. The skeleton was made out of jade, the cloth of the fan clearly wasn't some common material. Green light could be seen moving on the surface. A painting of mountains and water was depicted on the surface of the fan. If someone looked closely, they would discover that the river stream between the mountains was actually slowly flowing. Sky River Fan, 3rd grade. Water Drop Sword, 3rd grade. Zhuo couldn't help but sigh again at the variety of scriptures that Lingying sect had. They even used fans. When Yan Mingzi saw his water drop sword, his expression became ugly. However, he liked to collect all kinds of talismans and his eyes were very experienced. He instantly noticed that the quality of the water drop sword was slightly better than when he had been in possession of it. He became slightly depressed. Did flying swords selectively pick people as well? Please. Wen Fei shouted elegantly. The water drop sword moved before the word ended. Flowing water. Zhuo Mo's favorite starting move. This move was like a sheep climbing a cliff, traceless. The move he released right now was very different from before. Before, it had been light and faint. Right now, it was still quiet, but there was a hint of fire. It was like a white flame, burning without a sound. Wen Fei smirked and gently waved Sky River Fan. Zhuo felt his eyes blur and an incredibly thick pillar of water came from the sky like a water dragon, heading towards him. Water dragon roar. Attack against attack. No one would have thought that Wen Fei, such a warm and elegant person, would fight so brutally. The two were competing to see whose attack would reach the other first. Zhuo snorted. His sword presence didn't change. The Ling energy in his legs moving, he suddenly flashed towards the left. It was as though there were springs under his feet. His speed was extremely fast and dodged the water dragon. Competing in attacks? Zhuo wasn't afraid. Based on speed, nothing could compare to flying swords. He gathered his Ling energy and the water drop sword gave a slight hum. The sword turned into a stream of light, it was as fast as lightning. A thin water curtain suddenly appeared in front of Wen Fei. The water drop sword crashed heavily against the water curtain. The water curtain shook fiercely. Wen Fei's expression behind the water curtain changed slightly. However, the curtain shook, but still managed to stop the water drop sword. Zhuo was also surprised. This water curtain seemed to be a thin layer and he hadn't thought it could stop the water drop sword. It was much stronger than he had predicted. However, he could also see this water curtain had just managed to stop it. If he put in a bit more effort, it would certainly break. He was going to channel his Ling energy and hadn't thought the thick water dragon would act as if it was alive, turning nimbly and reversing back in his direction. In the blink of an eye, the water dragon rushed in front of him. When this water dragon appeared in front of him, he finally realized just how enormous it was. It was like a large river, roaring as it headed for his head, the presence extremely shocking. Zhuo didn't even think as the water drop sword turned into a dash of light and appeared between him and the water dragon. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and the water drop sword rose. Waterfall. Everyone felt the landscape suddenly flash and a waterfall seemed to have appeared in front of Zhuo. It was a waterfall composed of countless sword energies. As they flowed, they accurately hit the head of the water dragon. Boom! The head of the water dragon suddenly exploded, water splashing everywhere. The disciples that had been watching were instantly soaked but no one moved their eyes away. Such a spectacular fight, if they missed something, it would be such a pity. The water dragon continued to flow, as though it didn't have an end. The waterfall that was floating in the sky also seemed endless. Amazing! Yan Mingzi said, his mouth gaping. He was completely convinced now. The other was so powerful, winning last time, it wasn't due to trickery. Hu Shan didn't dare to blink and nodded in empathy. I had heard before that Wen Fei Shixiang's Sky River Fan can enter the top 3 of our generation of disciples. It really lives up to the rumors. Yan Mingzi said, sharing in the pride, right. But my water drop sword isn't mediocre. To be able to keep up with Sky River Fan, it isn't of average quality. I have really good eyes. That's because Zhuo's strong. Hu Shan wasn't polite, in your hands, it would be great if you could even block 5 of Wen Shixiang's moves. Yan Mingzi wasn't angry, I'm not good as others in fighting. However, in buying talismans, which one of you is my match? Hu Shan choked, not knowing what to say. Waves also spread in Tao Zhuer's heart. She would have never thought that Zhuo could keep up with Wen Fei Shixiang because she knew just how strong Wen Fei Shixiang was. Wen Fei Shixiang wasn't famous outside the sect, but in this generation of Ling Ying sect disciples, he was a truly strong person. He was deeply loved by the elders. That Sky River fan had been made specially for him by the sect elders and was the envy of countless people. Wenfei Shixiang didn't fail to live up to expectations. His talent was exceptional and he was hardworking. Adding on the nourishment from countless Ling Dan, his power was extremely deep. However, he rarely fought. Even the other disciples in the sect didn't know just how strong he was. Tao Zhu'er had accidentally saw Wenfei Shixiang cultivating and had been shocked. It had left a deep impression. That was why she had requested Wenfei Shixiang. She wanted to beat down Zhuo Mo's bravado. Also, Tao Zhu'er knew that the elders were planning for Wenfei Shixiang to make a display in the upcoming Dongfu Sword Test Conference. This horrid zombie was actually able to fight to a standstill with Wenfei Shixiang? How was this possible? Tao Zhu'er felt that her brains couldn't process it. The outer sect disciples stared with wide eyes, completely silent. Zhuo Mo didn't notice, in the female disciples, an adorable and pink apple face was extremely nervous. Even her little fists couldn't help but tighten. The two exchanged blows like lightning. The two moves passed in the blink of an eye. Right now, it had moved into a standstill period. Everyone was able to release a breath. Recalling what happened, they cheered. But the two that were facing off were not so relaxed. The disdain that Wenfei had initially had disappeared completely. What took over was seriousness. He, who had been desiring to show himself at the Sword Sect Conference, hadn't thought that he would meet such a strong opponent here. And Zhuo Mo, two balls of fire furiously jumped in his eyes, his desire for battle in full swing. A standstill was disadvantageous for him. There was still another person. If he didn't quickly end the fight, then he basically had no hope of victory for the next battle. His thoughts swirling, he gave a long howl and decided to attack with all his power. Chapter 87, Strong Attack versus Strong Attack. At the highest point of the waterfall, a flame suddenly appeared. This flame wasn't eye-catching, extremely faint, almost invisible as it burned silently. However, it was like the flame was dropped into oil, not water. Flames quickly spread across the top of the waterfall. On the top half of the waterfall, a cool flame flickered its crystal-clear tongues. The waterfall was instantly lit up by the cool flame. Each water-like sword energy became shrouded in a ball of fire. Li water was like fire as it fell down. The first sword energy shrouded in fire quickly landed in the water. Boom! A clear sound of explosion. A large section of the water dragon instantly was destroyed, water spraying everywhere. Boom 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 boom. The stream of explosions were like fireworks, ringing endlessly. Wenfei's expression changed. What sword move was this? Didn't the other practice a water element sword scripture? Why would there be fire? At this moment, he didn't have the leisure to think. In the blink of an eye, only a small half of the water dragon remained after the explosions. The other sword energies had increased in power due to those harmless-looking clear flames. Suppressing the uncertainty inside, the last bit of underestimation in his heart dissipated. He now saw Zhuo Mo as the greatest opponent he had ever faced. Wenfei gritted his teeth, his Ling energy flowed furiously, the Sky River fan suddenly snapped shut and he pointed the fan gently at Zhuo Mo, Sky River Prison. A spark of blue light came out of the fan and seemed to slowly fly towards Zhuo Mo. A strong feeling of danger suddenly rose in Zhuo Mo. This bit of blue light, the pressure it gave him far surpassed any of the previous moves. He didn't dare to be inattentive. His mind moved and the cold waterfall floating in the air instantly responded, leaping towards the blue light. Balls of clear fire. Inside were sword essences each as gentle as water. The rain of fire from the waterfall seemed to cover the blue light. Suddenly, Wenfei opened the Sky River fan, and shouted, "Open!" That blue light was suddenly like a large net, aimed directly at Zhuo Mo. Zhuo Mo wasn't able to dodge in time and instantly was trapped. Zhuo Mo only felt the blue light suddenly grow in front of his eyes. In the blink of an eye, waves filled his vision. His surroundings were a blur. Zuemo was very familiar with this kind of scenery. He had once practiced the sword in the river, and naturally was extremely familiar. Right now, he was in an air bubble. Who would have thought that the speck of blue light would contain such thick water energy? Those clear flames, when they entered the water, created explosions. However, there was too much water, and those little clearly water sword energies were ineffective and instead exploded on Zuemo. The pressure came in on all sides and the bubble was slowly being squeezed. Zuemo took a deep breath solemnly. This was the other's final attack. Instantly, his fighting spirit burst forward. He might not be able to compare to Wei Xingxixiang, but he wasn't putty that these wastrels could manipulate as they willed. Zuemo didn't detect that after practicing the sword, he had went from the initial fear of battle to quickly not fearing battle, and his desire for fighting was increasing. He was like that now. He became more excited the more he fought. Right now, especially when he saw Wen Fei's ultimate move, his fighting spirit had reached its peak. Come! He widened his eyes, shouting soundlessly inside. The waterfall which had been raging fire disappeared. The water drop sword turned into a streak of light and returned to Zuemo's hands. Seeming to have felt Zuemo's desire to fight, the body of the water drop sword vibrated, like ripples in water. The clear hum it gave made Zuemo even more excited. He closed his eyes, caressing the sword like he was caressing a lover. Without the support of the waterfall, the water which had been coming in at all sides didn't have any resistance and instantly went in. The air bubble shattered and Zuemo was swept into the water. Wen Fei couldn't disguise the joy on his face. If you were in the water, weren't you just a fish waiting for me to slice you? He shouted, up. The ball of water containing Zuemo slowly flew into the sky. The ball was enormous, like a small pond. Zuemo was the wild beast in the cage. No matter how he struggled, he wouldn't be able to break free. Wen Fei was smug inside. This prison of water, it was much more secure than one made of steel. The faces of the Wukong sword sect outer sect disciples whitened. They were terrified as they looked at the large shadow cast by the ball of water as it flew higher. Zuemo's figure inside the water became more indistinct and could barely be made out. To say nothing else, just being smashed from such a height, it would definitely lead to internal injury. Determination suddenly appeared on Xiaoguo's pale face. She suddenly rushed out of the crowd, heading for Wen Fei. Little girl, what do you think you are doing? A graceful figure blocked Xiaoguo's path. Tao Zhuer's face was cheerful as she looked at Xiaoguo. Move aside. Xiaoguo was angry and panicked. However, her anger was like a little kitten baring its teeth and scratching, extremely adorable. Ming Dao's tense heart relaxed. Seeing Xiaoguo's innocence, his eyes instantly lit up. This girl isn't bad. What are you called? Move aside. Xiaoguo was almost crying. Hints of cruelty flashed through Wen Fei's eyes. Looking at the ball of water in the air, he smirked smugly. Have a good taste of my Sky River prison. Finishing, he reached out with his left hand, and swiped towards the ball of water. The ball of water in the sky transformed. In the water ball, an enormous hand headed for Zuemo. This guy had made him look so bad, Wen Fei didn't want to let him off that easily. It was very interesting to play like a cat with a mouse. The Wukong disciples couldn't help but gasp in shock, not wanting to look. Hopelessness made its way onto Xiaoguo's face. She knew she wasn't a match for the two, but a rare determination flashed through her teary eyes. Just at this time, inside the water cage, the sword pointed downwards, Zuemo suddenly opened his closed eyes. For some reason, he thought about the day he had comprehended Li Water Sword essence, saw the enormous hand that was about to catch him. From the corner of his eye, he could see the figures beneath. He could imagine how smug the other person was at this time, how excited. But, my sword scripture. It's Li Water Sword scripture. The light exploded in Zuemo's eyes. It was like his eyes were suddenly void of all emotion, cold like the clear flames. His two hands grasping the water-drop sword, the slanted sword unhesitatingly made an upward slash against the current. Water burning heavens. The gigantic hand shattered. On the ground, Wen Fei's expression changed. How was it possible? How could he still counterattack in the water cage? He gritted his teeth and wanted to change his technique, but his face suddenly became empty of color. He discovered that he had completely lost control of the water cage. How was it possible? At this time, other people had detected the change in the sky and all lifted their heads. The ball of water was rapidly collapsing into itself as if there was a deep bottomless pit inside it. And when Zhuo Mo's body was revealed, everyone couldn't help but inhale. In mid-air, the water cage had disappeared, leaving behind Zhuo Mo's hands holding the sword. Shock was on Ming Dao and Tao Zhuer's face. They looked in disbelief at the sword in Zhuo Mo's hands. Around the 3 qi long sword, a 10 qi long blade of blue flame slowly and silently burned. This blue flame was completely composed of water. Heavens, he had absorbed all of Wen Fei Shixiang's Sky River prison, and turned it into his own weapon. This world, how could there be such a fantastical thing? This guy, was he really only Zhuji level? Looking at Xiaoguo, Tao Zhuer, and Ming Dao below, Zuo instantly understood what had happened. A flash of anger floated in his eyes. His 2 hands holding the sword, he lifted it up. The water flame on the sword was like an enormous blooming flower, soundlessly opening. Die! An angry bellow like thunder on a clear day. Containing all his anger, all his fighting spirit, all his Ling energy, Zuo was like a flash of light as he chopped downwards. A ruler-straight blue light suddenly appeared in midair, so bright one couldn't look directly at it. Below, the faces of Wen Fei and the others changed dramatically. This guy was crazy. His sword presence, it managed to wrap all 3 of them inside at once. At this time, the 3 couldn't attend to anything else. They all took out their final defenses. A water curtain appeared around Wen Fei, even thicker than last time. The peach blossom Ling armor on Tao Zhuer's body glowed brightly, peach blossoms flying in the air and shielding her inside. Ming Dao angrily took out a copper bell. The bell grew as it came into the open, firmly covering Ming Dao inside. At this time, Zuo forgot everything. In his eyes, there was only the 3 people below. He was doing one thing only. That was, channeling Ling energy, furiously, insanely pushing out Ling energy. The straight and cold light landed from the sky with a strong and fierce presence, heavily smashing the 3 from above. The most commonly used sword attacks were stab and slice. Even chopping was rarely used. And people could never have thought that a sword could be used to smash. What Zuo used was a smash. Like what he had raised wasn't a flying sword but a heavy hammer. Boom! The blue light flashed and swallowed the 3 people on the ground. After the ear-shattering explosion was a deathly silence. Zuo legs weakened and he sat down on the ground, panting for his life. Water burning heavens, was too strong for him. After he completed it he basically had no offensive power left. However, he gritted his teeth as he used the water-drop sword to stand up. Looking at the deep pit over 30 feet deep, he only had one word, great. In the large hole, Wen Fei and the others were unconscious from the explosion. Wen Fei's clothing was in tatters. The Ling armor on Tao Zhuer's body was almost shattered and Ming Dao's copper bell had broken into countless pieces. Zuo sighed. The terrifying power of this, water burning heaven, had to be credited to Wen Fei's water cage. If there hadn't been so much water, it definitely wouldn't reach such a terrifying result. If countless liters of water were dropped, this was already very scary. It was time to take his spoils. Zuo instantly became excited, completely disregarding any kind of manners. He was like a cat that smelt food, limping as he skipped towards the deep hole. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan were so frightened dumb that they forgot to stop him. They were really rich. Zhuo sighed inside. He wasn't easygoing at all. He took a water blue ring from Wenfei's hands. In reality, the best thing on his body was the Sky River fan. However, what Zhuo cultivated was the flying sword. This Sky River fan was good, but it wasn't suited to him. This ring wasn't normal. It definitely was the finest of the 3rd grade. It could increase the ability to control water. However, he still needed to experiment to find the specific effects. He took a 1000-year peachwood hairpin from Tao Zhuer's head. Slurp slurp. There were 3 formations on it. Evil removing, nourishing, focus. Good things, good things. From Ming Dao's body, Zhuo wasn't courteous in taking off the other's pair of boots. 3rd grade wind-passing boots. Zhuo was very knowledgeable. There were wind travel and movement formations on the boots and were very practical. Vicious. Yan Mingzi looked at the 3 things that Zhuo picked. He couldn't help but inhale. He both hurt and admired it. Hu Shan was like a statue. When he saw Zhuo's wolf-like and greedy gaze, he couldn't help but shudder. At this moment, he decided he didn't want the jade pendant anymore. Chapter 88, The Scalping Zombie. Everyone was dumbstruck where they stood, their minds blank. To say nothing of victory and defeat, but what the people had expected was fierce combat, exchanging blows back and forth, a tense situation, and end with a barely achieved victory. The result was 3 people were defeated by a single move. This result made everyone's jaws drop to the ground. Even the Wukong Sword Sect disciples who had been full of confidence in Zhuo had lost their ability to speak. Xiaoguo stared dazedly at Zhuo. How Xixiang looked when he had been plundering from their bodies. Oh, why would she have used plundering? No, Xixiang was appropriating his spoils. Xiaoguo unconsciously defended Xixiang. For you, Zhuo threw the 1000-year peachwood hairpin that he took from Tao Zhuer's head to Xiaoguo. Xiaoguo instinctively caught it. Inhales suddenly sounded among the female disciples. Their eyes suddenly became red as they looked at the peachwood hairpin on Xiaoguo's hands. They were like a herd of rabbits locked onto one single carrot. It's a pity that her Ling armor is shattered. Otherwise, removing it to give to you would be nice. Zhuo muttered regretfully. He completely hadn't thought about just how inappropriate it was to take off a female Shouja's armor in public. A moment later, Xiaoguo refocused. Looking at the peachwood hairpin on her hand shook as though it had shocked her and almost threw it away. Xixiang, this is too valuable. She might not recognize how good this peachwood hairpin was, but holding it in her hands, she could feel the extraordinariness of it. This peachwood hairpin, it was too valuable. This kind of thing, Xixiang should keep it for himself. She thought. Zhuo's eyes scanned the unconscious 3 people, impatiently saying, just take it and stop nagging. What Xiaoguo was most afraid of was Zhuo's impatience. She instantly became timid and afraid of speaking. Zhuo strongly controlled his impulse to plunder everything from the 3 people that were unconscious. He turned his face to look at Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan. Do you guys want to fight again? That voice, it was as warm as the wolf grandmother. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan both shuddered, their heads shaking like a rattle drum. Really, neither of you wants to fight? The 2 then nodded quickly like a chicken eating rice, their hands over their chests and their feet unconsciously moved back 2 paces. In their eyes, Zhuo had completely transformed into the most terrifying demon. Such a disappointment. When Zhuo expressionlessly said this sentence, his words were full of regret. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's hearts couldn't help but jump furiously. Zhuo waved his hand, take them away. Do not bother me in the future. It was like they had been pardoned from death. Exchanging a look, the 2 hurriedly picked up the 3 who were unconscious and ran away. They looked like they hated that their parents didn't give birth to them with 2 more legs. After their figures disappeared, Zhuemo couldn't hold up any longer and crashed to the ground. Seeing the situation, Xiaoguo instantly was shocked and ran over to ask in panic, Shixiang, are you wounded? Seeing the apple face full of concern, Zhuemo's heart warmed. Oh, nothing. Just a bit tired. Zhuemo waved his hand, pretending it was nothing. He then took out a dan from his bosom, and shoved it into his mouth. Folding his legs, he started to meditate. Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan only stopped when they couldn't see Wukong Mountain anymore. The two panted. Is that guy even human? Yan Mingzi said breathlessly, the difference here with our information is too big. Lucky that we ran fast enough. Hu Shan's face was relieved. Yan Mingzi still had lingering fears, exactly. Didn't you see his eyes as he looked at us? He wanted to strip us bare. The two couldn't help but think of Zhuemo's eyes. As though they didn't wear clothing on a snowy day, they shivered again and said at the same time, so scary. After a while, the two gradually walked out from Zhuemo's shadow. Yan Mingzi pointed at the three unconscious people, what to do with them. Hu Shan thought about how he would have to carry them to the sect and gritted his teeth, wake them up. After a while, 3 extremely tragic howls passed out. Zhuemo, I will never forgive you. Return my shoes, this girl will kill you. Zhuemo was extremely smug. He had completely changed his attire. His hand held the water drop sword, the streaming fire ling gathering pendant at his waist, a black-blue water ring on his finger, and on his feet were the wind travel boots. Extremely dandyish. This new set of attire, even Su Yixia, who was famous for the wealth of her family in the sect, was gaping when she saw it. She wondered inside, did Zhuemo shitty rob a talisman shop? While smug, he still had to live out his days. Zhuemo needed to spend time caring for the Ling garden that he rented. Other than that, he couldn't stop his daily cultivation. His days were very full. However, Zhuemo was very disappointed that for the next few days, no one came up to challenge him. These days nothing was as fast as plundering, not even Ling farming or dan making. This was a no investment, great profit, a sleight of hand. Zhuemo was regretful. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have beaten all of them into unconsciousness that day. A small continuous flow was the best. He was unaware that, due to his strong performance, all of Ling Ying's sect had been shocked. Especially his demeanor when he had been receiving his trophies. Under the effort of Yan Mingzi and Hu Shan's storytelling, it reached all of Ling Ying's sect. The nickname of the Scalping Zombie was created. The Scalping Zombie was undoubtedly the opponent that the wastrels didn't want to touch the most. Wastrels usually relied on expensive talismans and countless jinxure to battle. However, if they went to provoke the Scalping Zombie, wasn't it giving money to the other? If they took great talismans, and they lost, then it would be hard to keep possession of the talisman. According to the detailed description from the talisman expert Yan Mingzi and the comparison to the talismans the 5 people had lost, it proved that the Scalping Zombie's eyes were extremely experienced. If they lost, what they would lose was definitely the most valuable and expensive talisman they had. But if they wore only trash to go make a challenge, the already low chance of winning would head towards 0. The wastrels of Ling Ying's sect were all smart and perceptive. No one dared to go provoke this Scalping Zombie. The elders of Wukong's sword sect were all absent. Zhuemo had an extremely enjoyable life. Especially because no one cared about him making dan. He would make a batch of golden crow pills every day. This was a very steady source of income. However, he didn't want to spend too much effort on it. Golden crow pills might be profitable, but it was still a first-grade Ling Dan, and the profits were limited. Zhuemo's eyes had been spoiled by the fine talismans on his body. If he only relied on making golden crow pills, he would need at least half a year to be able to buy just any of the talismans he was wearing right now. The price of normal third-grade talismans were not expensive and Zhuemo could afford it. However, for the fine specimens like this one, the price would reach an incredible height. Zuemo once again took up his previous experiment to use the essence of the sun as the primary and the Li fire seal formation as the auxiliary fire, to make a new kind of Lingdan. Taking up this eternally failing experiment wasn't completely for Jingshi. He was going for a golden crow fire. Golden crow fire was a 4th grade fire seed. If he had it, the low-grade Lingdan he made would automatically increase a level. Also, Golden Crow Fire was one of the originators of all the fires in the world. It could merge with many other fire seeds. In the future, if he encountered better fire sources, he could merge it into the other fire. Of course, for Zuemo at this time, Golden Crow Fire was already the best fire in the world. Even more, there was a possibility he could achieve Golden Crow Fire through his own power. What would fill him more full of energy and fighting spirit other than this? He burrowed into Master's Record's room and started to research for Ling grasses that could endure the essence of the sun and other dominant forces. Just as Zuemo prepared to focus and enter seclusion, the pink paper crane landed from the sky. Yi, what's the answer from last time's game? Zuemo hit his head, and wailed misfortune. These days, he had been enchanted in dan-making and threw that so-called game into the back of his head. Without any other way, he could only harden his head and reply, "Apologies, I was busy these days. Yi doesn't place importance on me. I'm very hurt." Zuemo felt his head swell. Threat. This definitely was a threat. How about another 2 days? Zuemo decided that in these 2 days, even if he had to not eat or sleep, he would definitely solve this game. He knew just how ruthless and vicious this paper crane girl was. However, he once again underestimated the paper crane girl's ruthlessness and viciousness. Just as Zuemo warily unfolded the pink paper crane that just flew over, he felt his eyes blur and the surroundings instantly changed. Damned woman! Zuemo swore angrily. It wasn't the first time that he encountered such a situation. It also wasn't the first time the damned woman used this trick. Hee, you don't scold me. Who made it that you didn't put importance on me? Yi doesn't want to play with me, I just have to find ways to amuse myself. Hee, this is a maze that I learned when I was 7. It's very fun. Yi, slowly enjoy it. A sweet-to-the-bones voice came out of the air, carrying a hint of laziness and indifference. Damned woman. Zuemo forced the words through his teeth. If the other was in front of him, he would definitely leap over and use the water-drop sword to chop her into mulch. This damned uncaring, bored, and inane woman. His swearing didn't receive any reply. Zuemo slowly calmed down from the anger burning inside. Maze? He scanned the surroundings. Strangely, he was slightly panicked. Under his feet was a checkerboard. Each square was 1 foot squared, either black or white, alternating as it spread to the edge of the horizon. Illusion, this was an illusion. Zuemo told himself. If the other said that this was a maze formation, then it was certainly an illusion. However, all of this seemed so real. Zuemo could even feel the hardness of the tiles under his feet. It was completely empty. Zuemo seemed to be standing in the middle of nowhere, alone and without aid. Luckily, there wasn't anything dangerous. Zuemo was slightly comforted. He started to ponder how he would walk out of this maze formation. The formations that he knew were pitifully few, and the maze formation in front of him clearly wasn't one of those. A maze formation that damned woman knew at 7 years old. Zuemo started to grit his teeth again. Suddenly, a ball of mist floated out of nowhere. But the mist came quickly and left quickly. However, when the mist faded, Zuemo was dumbstruck as he looked at the scene in front of him. Chapter 89, Silly Yao. The mist faded and a hot spring had appeared. In the steam that rose up, a crowd of beautiful women who were bathing could be barely made out. Their eyes were alluring and extremely seductive. The smooth and silky skin seemed to have magnetism, securely holding Zuemo's eyes. The beauties played and laughed, disregarding Zhuo as empty air. When had the pitiful Zhuo ever seen something like this? It was like he had been struck by lightning, dumbstruck. The laughter and breathing of the women burrowed into his ear. He felt his throat was dry, his entire body hot. Something inside his body seemed to be moving. What spell was this? Zhuo felt his heart beat faster and faster until it felt like his heart was going to jump out of his chest, uncontrollably beating. He used all the energy in his body to struggle to swallow. He detected that his entire body wasn't normal, definitely not normal. He started to channel Ling power. It didn't have an effect. He couldn't help but be shocked. Such a strong spell. Such a strong maze formation. Calm. Calm. It was fake. Fake. Zhuo told himself. At this time, he should close his eyes, but for some reason, his eyelids today didn't listen to him. It seemed that there was a mysterious world in that hot spring that uncontrollably attracted his eyes. If he didn't restrain himself forcefully, his legs would unconsciously walk towards the hot spring, tracelessly capturing a person's mind and soul, imperceptibly controlling a person's body. Zhuo's last bit of rationality concluded, this group of beauties were in reality a high-grade maze formation. 4th grade or even 5th grade. The person trapped would feel hot, the rhythm of breathing lost, the mind disturbed, Ling power channeling would be obstructed. He reflexively swallowed again. Suddenly, Zhuo's pupils expanded. The hot steam suddenly disappeared. Those beautiful women, without an exception, their heart-startling faces, their amazing bodies, the porcelain skin and a blow like no other before attacked Zhuo like a stream of lightning. His breathing stopped, his heart stopped at this moment as well. Was this the final attack? All the beauties suddenly stopped moving like they were under a paralyzing spell. After that, with speed visible to the naked eye, they started to age and wither. The healthy and alluring skin lost the glow, the tightness, became wrinkled like the bark of a tree. Their beautiful appearance quickly withered and lost vitality. The skin turned bad, rotted and revealed the white bones inside. In the flick of a finger, a crowd of beautiful women became a crowd of skeletons. His chest heaving, Zhuo felt like he had ate countless mosquitoes and wanted to throw up. This reversal of events, all the blood in his body seemed to reverse flow and he almost spat out blood. The viciousness of this final attack. Zhuo was extremely shocked. The person who created this maze formation was really strong. He hadn't felt even a bit of Ling power. This was a traceless attack. At this time, a tearing sound occurred next to his ear. The scene in front of him suddenly twisted as though it was being sucked away by something. Beautiful women, skeleton, the black and white checkerboard, it completely disappeared. He saw Pu Yao opening his mouth and a wisp of smoke was sucked inside. His state seemed comfortable and satisfied. When did Pu Yao recover? Did he just ruin the maze formation right now? Pu Yao closed his mouth and turned to look at Zhuo, lightly throwing down, "You have a nosebleed." Zhuo dazed and hurried to touch his nose. As expected, it was red. Ha 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 ha, Pu Yao laughed carefree, his face mischievous as he looked at Zhuo. Zhuo didn't understand at all. Bleeding proved that the other's maze formation was really too strong. He had actually been wounded and bled without him noticing. But why was Pu Yao laughing? He felt that Pu Yao's laugh was slightly strange. Even now, his chest felt unspeakably uncomfortable. The last ultimate attack, the power was too amazing. The feeling of disgust lingered in his heart. Barely managing to calm down, Pu Yao glanced at Zhuo and started snickering again. He swept across the pink-colored paper on Zhuo's hands and snatched it over, shoving it into his mouth. He chewed 2 times and swallowed it down. For the second time, he had a satisfied expression. You eat paper?" Zhuo pointed at Pu Yao, face full of disbelief as he asked. Such pure energy, it would be a pity to waste it. Pu Yao thrust out a blood-red tongue and licked his lips, still hungering. When did you wake up? Zuo asked dumbly. When this maze formation started. Pu Yao snickered. However, Zuo felt that the others' eyes as they looked at him were slightly weird. You've recovered? Zuo still decided to have some concern for Pu Yao. Not that easy. Pu Yao stretched and said lazily, the injury this time was too much. Recovering isn't that easy. From his expression, he didn't seem to be that concerned with his injury. It seemed the situation was better than he had thought. Zuo felt slightly safer. He thought about the beautiful women he had just seen. He hurriedly asked, what maze formation was it just now? Too strong. I was injured without me noticing. Ha 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 ha, Pu Yao couldn't resist and started howling with laughter again, holding his stomach. Laughing to the point of not being able to stand up. Zuo's face was puzzled. He didn't know why Pu Yao was responding like this. This maze formation really was powerful. At a place far away from Sky Moon Jie. Why hasn't there been a response? Is he really not tempted by beauty? Has he surrendered? A girl propped up her chin and talked to herself. A while later. Still nothing. Her face was suspicious. There's no reason. As long as he isn't a playboy, he shouldn't be able to resist. Is he really experienced? He didn't seem like it. Did I look wrong? This miss dislikes that kind of men the most. She completely did not know her tempting maze formation had been altered by Pu Yao and its effect had moved from one extreme to another extreme. She wasn't satisfied. In Little West Wind Yard. Do you understand women? Pu Yao asked. Of course. Zuo looked strangely at Pu Yao. This question was so dumb and idiotic. Had Pu Yao's mind been wounded? His mind was now unclear. He reminded in goodwill, Liang Feng Shiji, Shaoguo, master. They are all women. No. No. Pu Yao had previously been an old antique of 3,000 years ago but, at least, he had been somewhat normal. But now, his mind had been wounded and become dumb. Zuo looked slightly sympathetically at Pu Yao. So pitiful. A sky Yao becoming a dumb Yao. Meeting Zuo's gaze, Pu Yao snickered, have you been close with a woman? Zuo looked with even more sympathy at Pu Yao, I'm close to all of them. Pu Yao's snickers suddenly stopped, like he had choked. He suddenly found that it was very difficult to explain this matter to Zuo. When you see them, do you have any strange thoughts in your head? Pu Yao made a last effort. Strange thoughts. Zuo struggled, and then nodded, I have. So you really do have some thoughts. Pu Yao became excited. He continued in leading, what thoughts? Selling medicine. Zuo bashfully and obediently answered. Pu Yao was dumbstruck. Zuo counted on his fingers as he said, but it's a pity that Shaoguo is still too poor right now. Master, she won't buy the dan that I make. Usually, only Liang Feng Shiji would buy. However, Su Qing Shiji also would buy. Oh, after some more time, I would advertise moisture dan to them. And there must also be Su Yixia Shiji. Oh, Hao Min might be lacking, but I won't say no to Jingshi. In the future, I will make lots and lots of dan. Elder Wei Nan's Jade Scrolls said that women are the best people to sell to. Pu Yao sprayed out blood and collapsed. After a while, his limbs twitched and he struggled up. He said, refusing to give up, didn't you just see those naked women? Didn't you feel something? If before, Zuo had been using a look reserved for silly Yao, then now Zuo's gaze as he looked at Pu Yao was like if he was looking at an idiot. Full of pity, he said, Pu Yao, that's the seal formation. Gurgle gurgle. Pu Yao once again fell down, fresh blood furiously flowing out from his mouth like a spring. So pitiful. Zuo looked sympathetically at Pu Yao who had been heavily affected. However, Zuemo quickly didn't have the time to sympathize with Pu Yao. The sect leader and the others all returned to the mountain. When Zuemo saw the deep exhaustion in the expression of the elders, he perceptibly didn't say anything. The sect leader didn't say any words, only waved his hands to signal for the disciples to leave. This time, the incident really is too big. Pei Yuanran sighed deeply. Sky Moon Jia would not be peaceful. The others were silent. Yan Li's face was worried. We have to take precautions. Wei Xing's talents are so outstanding, 1 in 100 years. We need to think of ways for him to reach Jindan early, otherwise, everyone understood the rest. A genius, no matter the talent, before they matured, they were all very fragile. Killing an exceptional Zhuji Xiuzha only required an average Ningmai. They only needed a seal, a talisman. Oh, I wanted Wei Xing to have a strong foundation. Looking at it now, time doesn't wait for me. Pei Yuanran gave a deep sigh. He thought for a moment and said resolutely, in abnormal times, we have to act abnormally. Everyone, gather all your power to help Wei Xing. Xin Yan and Yan Lu nodded at the same time. Shi Feng Rong hesitated for a second and said, what about Zuemo? Pei Yuanran said helplessly, Zuemo's talent might be outstanding. In another sect, they naturally would take care and nurture. But our assets, Shimi, you know it as well. If we need to put all our energy into nurturing, we could barely just nurture Wei Xing. Yes. Shimi, I only have that much in my stores. I don't even know if there is enough for just Wei Xing. Yan Lu urged. Shi Feng Rong knew that what the Shixiang said was the truth. Wukong's sword sect wasn't some large sect and didn't have much wealth. How were young experts made? Made from countless Jingshi and Lingdan. Wei Xing was the undisputed successor of the sect. Shi Feng Rong knew very well. However, Zuemo was her disciple. She gritted her teeth. I do not have objections on nurturing Wei Xing. But since Zuemo won't have a share of the resources, then we should reimburse him in other areas. If I need to make Dan for Wei Xing, in the future, I won't have time to teach him and will have to leave him to his own devices. Speaking of it, she was slightly sorrowful and then raised her head. I only have a request. Other than some special jade scrolls, all the jade scrolls in the sect should be open for him. This, Pei Yuanran was slightly hesitant. Shi Feng Rong's request was against the sect's rules. But when he saw the determination on Shi Feng Rong's face, he still nodded. Yes, I agree. Nurturing Wei Xing. The most important part was the supply of Lingdan. On this point, Shi Feng Rong was extremely important. Pei Yuanran was a charismatic person. He thought and then stood. Since the situation is this bad, the jade scrolls would be garbage if they are in the pavilion. From today onwards, all the jade scrolls in the sect will be open to all inner sect disciples. And then the whole of Wukong's sword sect shook. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.